Chapter 41. Thorin's Request. When their embrace ended, Thorin turned and stared at the rising silhouette of Stormvale Castle, surprise and admiration in his voice. In only a few months, you've built such a magnificent city. Your speed in restoring your homeland far exceeds anything I imagined, Tarns. Tarns stood beside him and answered without hesitation, gratitude plain on his face. If not for the grain and livestock you sent at the start, I couldn't have transformed this place so quickly. Even with sorcery, I cannot conjure food from nothing, otherwise my people would have come here and starved. Please accept my thanks, Thorin. Thorin shrugged as if it were nothing, but accepted the thanks with good humor. Fili and Kili exchanged a look, then stepped forward together, bowed low, and called out in unison. Teacher Tarnis, greetings, we've come to see you. Tarns was amused and a little startled by their sudden loud voices. He hadn't expected such a display in public. How have you two been? Practicing your prayers every day? He asked. Kili spoke first, bright and proud. Fili and I have already learned half of the prayers written in the Beast Prayers book you gave us. Fili added calmly, and we think if we master all the prayers in that book, we'll be able to extend them and create our own dwarf prayers. Tarnis's eyes lit up. If Fili and Kili could truly do that, it would be something entirely new, prayers unique to dwarves. He had long since mastered the prayers of the lands between, so the idea excited his curiosity. I eagerly await that day, he said with a smile. Then it will be my turn to ask you two to teach me what you discover. Fili and Kili were taken aback. With our station, how could we teach you, Teacher Tarnans? Fili protested. Tarnas waved them off. On the path of learning, the capable may become teachers. Don't be nervous. I truly want to learn anything new you create. Thorin interposed, looking at his nephews and scolding gently. All right, Fili, Kili, since Tarns asks, take him seriously. The dwarves straightened instantly and nodded eagerly. Ha ha, Thorin, don't frighten my students, Tarns laughed. This isn't the place for a long talk. Let's go into the city. Thorin's caravan creaked slowly into Stormvale. It was the first friendly caravan to arrive at the stronghold of the Storm King. The heavy carts rolled over the cobbles, hooves striking stone with a crisp rhythm that broke the quiet of the street. Mills was cleaning a corner of Stormvale that day, his turn, a job he'd taken since coming to the Golden Tree territory. He had just finished sweeping when he saw the sturdy dwarves and paused, broom in hand. The dwarves were in leather, their arms showing beneath rough tunics. Every cart was laden, rare ore from the Blue Mountains, finely crafted dwarf furniture. Mills let his imagination run, a piece of crystal ore on his hearth, a carved dwarf chair to warm his cottage, maybe dwarf toys for Doris and the other children. He'd heard dwarf toys were exquisite, like those he'd seen in Lohan. Thanks to the treasures Rogier had discovered, the gold Elrond had sent, and several trades with dwarf caravans, the Golden Tree territory now had circulating currency. Even newcomers like Mills had received wages. When his pay bag had been handed over, his fellow villagers had been astonished. Back in Lohan, working for a lord didn't come with coin like this. Doris's mother, skilled at farming, had been posted to the fields and earned even more, and her face had shone. With so many people, there weren't enough herders, which is why Mills, a Lohan native, had become a cleaner at Stormvale, a position that hadn't existed before. The idea of hiring refugees and paying them regular wages had been Kenneth Haight's suggestion. This noble, ancient aristocrat argued that giving the Middle-earth folk useful work and steady pay would help them adapt to their new lives as citizens of the Golden Tree territory. Tarns had agreed. If Kenneth thought it worthwhile, Tarns was willing to try. As Mills watched the caravan, Tarns, riding his mount Torre, noticed him and called with a smile. Mills, stop gawking at the goods. Tell your people I'll have the dwarves stop here so they can look, and notify the golden lineage in Moen City that a new dwarf caravan has arrived. Mills startled, bowed, and replied, Yes, Lord Tarns. Tarns slowed Torride and rode up to Thorin's carriage. The two conversed briefly. Thorin nodded and called to his coachman. The carts turned and came to a halt on a wider street. Thorin and his company accompanied Tarns to the city lord hall. Inside, Nefeli Luke was there, slightly bored, swinging her battle axe through the air, exercise more than anything, when the door opened. She stopped and went to greet them. Tarnas, staying here is truly dull. Oh, and who have you brought? Tarnas stepped aside to reveal Thorin and introduced him. This is Thorin Oakenshield of the Blue Mountains. He sent us our first and most valuable supplies. Nephili Lukes brightened. Thank you. If it weren't for those provisions, we would still be starving and under constant orc threat. It would have been impossible for you to raise these cities so quickly by sorcery alone. May the breeze guide you home when you are lost. Thorin bowed and replied, I heard Dwalin speak of you, Nephili Luke, Tarns's bravest companion. Thank you for helping him with his axe work. He came back bragging. Tarns looked surprised. When did you train Dwalin? I didn't know. Nephili smiled. While you were teaching the dwarf brothers their prayers, I passed by the farmland and saw a dwarf working on his axe technique. I stopped to correct a few movements and taught him a trick or two. At that moment, Fili and Kili arrived with Thorin and heard the exchange. Kili blurted out, Those weren't small tricks, Lady Nephili. Dwalin beat 5 dwarves by himself on the training ground. Gloin was among them. Fili nodded enthusiastically. Thorin looked at them and laughed, remembering Dwalin's own astonishment at the feat. I only corrected a few motions, Nephili said, modest. He's a fine warrior on his own. The 2 banished knights outside closed the hall doors behind them with a heavy creak, and the company sat down. Seats had been adjusted for Thorin, Fili, and Kili, so their dwarf builds wouldn't make conversation awkward. A golden lineage servant brought hot tea for everyone. Seeing the dwarves, Tarns told the servers, Change the tea for Thorin and his companions to a good wine. Thorin declined with a gentle smile. Thank you, Tarnas. We'll save the wine for tonight. Tea is fine. Tarnas took the head seat and looked at Thorin. Beyond thanks, you've come for another matter, haven't you? Thorin's face became grave for a moment, then he smiled. A great wizard sees through all things. Yes, there is something I've come to discuss. Tarns glanced at Fili and Kili. Their surprised faces told him they were not in on whatever Thorin was about to propose. He leaned forward. What is so important that you traveled from the Blue Mountains? Thorin did not answer at once. He wrapped his rough hand around the warm porcelain cup before speaking, thumb tracing its rim. I plan to call the Arid Luin Council, the representatives of the 7 dwarf kingdoms of the Blue Mountains, to propose a plan to reclaim the Lonely Mountain. He raised a hand to still Fili and Kili, who were already springing up to speak. I want to invite you to that meeting, Tarnas. Tarnas blinked in surprise and tapped his breast. Me? But that's a meeting of dwarven realms. Won't my presence as a man anger your kin? Thorin's smile was steady. If you were only a man, perhaps. But you are not only a man. You are a wizard. A wizard? Tarns repeated, taken aback. Thorin nodded, accenting the word. Yes, wizard. A wicked dragon sleeps in the Lonely Mountain. To take it back, we must face that fire-breathing beast. They remember the terror a dragon brings. Its flames can turn a dwarf to ash. Many will not agree to such a plan. But with a powerful wizard at the council, someone who can turn the tide, the representatives of the 7 kingdoms will be far more likely to accept my proposal. Tarns considered the name Gandalf. Gandalf mentioned the Lonely Mountain to me once. He's supposed to be heading north looking into things. Thorin's eyes brightened. Gandalf the Grey? If he attends as well, then 2 wizards would support me, you and him. The council could hardly refuse. Tarns gently lowered his hand. Calm yourself, Thorin. I don't know where Gandalf is or if he'll join a council, and I can't promise his support. Thorin realized he'd gotten carried away and flushed a little. Yes, I apologize. I was too eager. Seeing you rebuild a homeland here has made me impatient to reclaim my own. Tarnas smiled. I understand. You helped the golden tree at its lowest. Your reward was already paid in the grain, the seeds, and the animals you sent. I will grant your request, and not just attend a meeting. If you ask it, I will stand with you against the dragon. Thorin looked up incredulously, voice trembling with hope. Tarnas, are you serious? Even to face the dragon with me? Tarnas nodded firmly. Is it strange for a wizard to stand against a wicked dragon? Thorin shook his head, stunned and grateful. I had prepared many arguments. You are the first to support my plan without me offering reward. Tarns waved the matter away. Your reward was paid when you gave us hope. Fili sprang up, excitement written all over him. Uncle Thorin, I want to go with you to reclaim the Lonely Mountain. Keely mirrored him wordlessly, nodding so eagerly he almost toppled his chair. Thorin's face softened as he looked at his nephews, then grew serious again. Sit. Listen until I finish, Feely Keely. They quieted at his tone. Thorin continued, resolute. The council will meet in half a year. Dane is in the Iron Hills, and messages to him take a long time. He stared past the windows as if his gaze could reach the lonely mountain itself. After the meeting, whether the 7 kingdoms agree or not, I will gather a company and set out for the lonely mountain. Chapter 42. Thorin's plan. Night fell, yet the Golden Tree's domain remained bright. In Stormvale City, which usually slept quietly, dwarven folk songs rang out. Melodies drifted from windows where dim lights flickered, notes opening like flowers into the night, spilling down the streets and up into the sky. Tarns liked these dwarves. They seemed full of life, natural entertainers who spread joy wherever they went. Inside the city lord hall, Thorin watched his kinsmen, many of them drunk, standing on the dining tables and clapping along. He said to Tarns with some embarrassment, I apologize. My people have caused you trouble. Tarnas laughed and waved it off as he took in the lively scene. It's all right, Thorin. The city hasn't been this lively in a long time. Let them make noise for a while. Besides, the tables are already cleared of food, so nothing's being wasted. Thorin glanced at the dwarves playing tossing games, expertly flinging fruit, cheese, and ham into one another's mouths, and a smile slowly spread across his face. My folk haven't been this relaxed outside the Blue Mountains in a very long time, Tarns. He caught sight of Killy, about to dive into the food tossing, and his expression shifted. Feely, noticing Thorin's look, nudged Killy and pulled him back. He raised his wineglass and jabbed Killy in the waist. Keely glanced down at Feely's look, then over at Thorin, and immediately sat back down, pretending to concentrate on the bacon on his plate. Thorin's expression eased. The city lord hall was full, not only of dwarves, but of members of the Golden Lineage and Mills. The elves that Elrond had sent to help had been invited, but they did not attend. Tarns had asked, and an elven leader answered politely, We do not wish to be a discordant note at your banquet, honored wizard. The Durin line, led by Thorin Oakenshield, once had conflict with another branch of our kin in Mirkwood. Your dwarves' stubbornness and prejudice might mistake us for those of Mirkwood, and to avoid misunderstanding, we will not disturb your evening. May you have a pleasant night, Lord Tarns. So at the banquet, there were only humans and dwarves. The demi-humans preferred their own caves to a human banquet in a stone hall. They settled into deep, roomy caverns for the night. Tarns had not forgotten Kenneth Haight's request about the demi-humans before he left for Tockrendale. Not long after his return, he summoned a demi-human queen, towering to the height of a troll, who, with practical gratitude, led her people to settle peacefully in the countryside near Moan City. Kenneth, who knew demi-humans best, said that this was a typical pattern. Gather around their queen by day, sleep near her at night, and call it peace. The afterglow of the banquet drifted away on the night wind. Laughter faded. The clock hands swept on. The hall grew dim. The dwarves' snores rose and fell through the quiet. They sprawled across tables and chairs, unrestrained and jovial. Not a scrap of food remained on the golden and silver platters. These dwarves could make merry without waste. The Golden Lineage bowed to Tarns at the head of the hall and quietly took their leave, smiling at the dwarves' simple, sincere joy. Mills and the others also greeted Tarns before departing. Outside the hall, the night was deep and starred. Moonlight, as if infected by the banquet's cheer, seemed to sway softly. Thorin and Tarnas stepped out together. Thorin had been careful with his drinking and was not passed out like many of his kin. Feely and Keely, however, snored loudly from within. Thorin's cheeks were flushed. He was plainly tipsy. He gripped Tarnas's arm, tilted his head to the bright moon above the stars, and said, I am truly happy tonight, Uncle Tarns. Good to hear, Tarns replied. He was sober, having not drunk. Thorin's fingers loosened as he turned, his gaze unfocused, toward the twin golden trees nearby. Their branches were full, their leaves glowing with a soft, peaceful light. Tiny particles of light blinked in the night like countless stars, dressing Stormvale City in a golden dream. The air softened under that light, a gentle breeze moved the treetops, and golden flakes of blessing drifted down. Magnificent, the golden tree, Thorin murmured. Its light shines even in the deepest night, like an eternal sun that brings hope and warmth. Tarn smiled. The golden glow seemed to open for Thorin a door into the past. Thorin's voice dropped and trembled, as if calling up a faraway memory. Do you know, Uncle Tarns? This light reminds me of the lonely mountain. Once its halls flowed with gold, and dwarves, men, and elves all gathered there. Dwarves labored, uncovering veins deep underfoot. Men and elves sang in the green fields at the mountain's feet. His words made the air heavy with a different kind of light, as if the lonely mountain's glory stood present. But treasure drew the covetous gaze of the dragon from the north. It brought fire and death, burned the human towns at the foot of the mountain. The scent of death clings to those ruins still. It broke into the lonely mountain and took it for itself. My people were driven from our homeland, stripped of our pride, and have wandered ever since. Thorin's voice fell. His hands clenched, knuckles white, as if he could still hear the dragon's roar. Tarns listened, staring into the distance, as if peering back through time to that once prosperous, now ruined home. In his mind rose mountains with golden veins and an evil dragon sleeping beneath. He patted Thorin's shoulder and said, "Your homeland will bloom again, in its own light, just as mine has." "It will," Thorin breathed, drawing in, nodding firmly. Tarn asked, "When do you plan to set out for the Lonely Mountain after the council?" Thorin hesitated. "I can't say yet. It depends on the meeting 6 months from now. If the representatives of the 7 dwarf kings do not agree, I may have to wait another year. If they do agree, I'll be honest, before I came to you, I had little confidence they would." Tarn smiled and gestured for him to relax. "Why the lack of confidence? That's not the Thorin I know. Because 140 years ago, in 2799, we dwarves had just ended the war with the orcs at Azog, Thorin said, voice somber. Though we won, it was a Pyrrhic victory. On the night of victory, there was no feast or song, only half of us could stand, only half had hope of healing. The pain of that war still haunts us." Tarns nodded slowly. "I see. If the 7 kingdoms agree, they must prepare for war with a dragon. I doubt a people still recovering would willingly face that." Thorin smiled at the understanding. "You're right, Uncle Tarns. That's why I am truly grateful you stand with me." "I've slain many dragons in my time," Tarns said. "I can't say about the one within the Lonely Mountain, but experience tells me this. Facing a dragon with an army is rarely wise. I don't doubt your warriors, Thorin, but many will be frozen with fear when a dragon dives from the sky. Men and dwarves lacking that iron in their hearts will throw their lives away needlessly." Thorin was silent for a moment, memories aligning with Tarns's words. Most, even the well-trained, had frozen when Smaug struck. "You're right," he said at last. "What I need are not vast armies, but warriors full of courage, those who do not fear death." Tarnis quickly added, not wishing Thorin to swing to an extreme, "Don't misunderstand. I don't mean you shouldn't use your armies at all. They can assist. For example, if we reach the mountain and injure the dragon inside and it tries to flee, its size will make it hard to stop. That's when a well-placed ambush of archers outside could be decisive." In short, Tarns advised against a frontal army assault. Thorin's eyes brightened. "We once forged black arrows that could pierce dragon scale. We could set wind bows at the gate." He frowned. "But few black arrows were made, and the craft of forging them, I'll look for the technique when I return. I must choose companions who will enter the mountain with me and wound the dragon severely." "Don't worry," Tarns said with a smile. "Take it step by step. The dragon won't be faced tomorrow. Choose a few trusted warriors. I will select 3 from my side as well. I promise you, these 3 are heroes, each worth 1,000. Thorin relaxed. Thinking of Nephili Lu, whom he had met that day, he smiled. "I cannot refuse your kindness. I promise that when we take the mountain back, you will share in its treasures." Tarns did not know Thorin's mind. He thought Thorin might send Nephili, but Thorin's intended champion was someone else entirely, already chosen. Thorin drew a deep breath. "It's late. I'll go wake Fili and Kili. As members of Durin's line, they got carried away and drank too much. I've not taught them well enough." Tarns, smiling and silently forgiving the brothers, fell into step behind him. "For my sake as their teacher, let them relax tonight, Thorin." Thorin shrugged helplessly. "All right, but only this once. Back inside, the attendants looking over the snoring dwarves were at a loss. They were important guests of Lord Tarn's. The attendants didn't want to rouse them and risk offense. Thorin said, seeing their hesitation, "Don't worry, dwarves are hardy. Let them sleep here." Tarns instructed the attendants, "Bring some blankets and cover them." "Yes, Lord Tarnas," they replied, bowing and moving off. Tarns glanced at Thorin and then at the sleeping dwarves, pointing. "Would you like to sleep here with them, or in the room I prepared for you?" Thorin looked at Killy, who had rolled over and was hugging his leg in a sleepy, stubborn sprawl, and sighed. He gently disentangled Killy's leg. "I won't sleep on the cold floor, and how could I refuse a chamber provided by a wizard? Thanks to all the readers for your votes. Please continue to vote, recommend, and buy monthly tickets if you like. I've been adjusting my schedule these past few days. I used to stay up too late, but now I can write 6,000 words a day. Thanks to Rainy Didn't Rain, Mr. Gugu the Dove, and for the donations." Chapter 43, Selen's Discovery. Around noon the next day, a groaning, hungover Feely slowly pried his eyes open. Voices drifted nearby. He blinked and realized he was lying on the floor, wrapped in a blanket, and felt an immediate sinking dread. The last thing he remembered from the night before was his uncle still at the banquet. How long would Thorin scold him this time? A big hand settled beside him. Feely turned and saw Keely, still asleep, smiling in that foolish, peaceful way. Feely glanced about. The plates and tables had been cleared. The room showed no trace of the feast. A few dwarves slept soundly under blankets, snoring like Keely. Thorin and Tarnans were talking by the city lord's seat in the hall, and the warrior Nephili Lu was not there. Thorin in the city lord's hall? Feely's hand flashed out and slapped Keely across the face. Keely mumbled and rolled over, trying to go back to sleep. Feely slapped him again. This time, Keely sat up, blinking, bewildered. At the sight of his brother's stern face, he tried to curl his eyes shut and go back to dreaming, but Feely steadied him and pinched his chin, turning his face toward Thorin. The wakeful look came immediately. Tarns laughed at the sight, and even Thorin's severe gaze softened a fraction. "Thorin," Tarns said with a teasing tone, "don't be too hard on them." Then he called through the hall. "Feely, Keely, get up and rouse the others. It's almost noon, no good letting them sleep away the day." "Yes, Teacher Tarns," Feely answered loudly, snapping to attention. Keely was still dazed. A light kick from his brother and a second slap were enough to get him moving. The two of them set about waking the dwarves sprawled on the floor, gathering blankets and helping those too drunk to stand. They moved with surprising competence for two men who'd clearly been celebrating until dawn. The pressure of Thorin's look did wonders for discipline. Thorin watched them go with a rare hint of indulgence. "Those two troublesome fellows," he muttered. "Everyone has their wild years," Tarn said, smiling. "You've done well with them, Thorin." Thorin nodded, but then said, "I'm setting off today." Tarnas blinked. "So soon? You only arrived yesterday." Thorin glanced toward the window and smiled with a relieved expression. "I meant to stay longer, see how you rebuilt your homeland in person. But I found you'd done more than I'd imagined. It spurred me. I'm itching to get back and press the matter of reclaiming the Lonely Mountain. Convening the Council of Dwarven Representatives will take time, and after our talk last night, I realize how much I still need to prepare. I've hardly considered how to confront the great dragon within. Your words put a lot into focus." "Safe travels, then," Tarn said. Thorin hesitated a moment, then turned to Tarnas. "One small favor." Tarns raised an eyebrow. "What is it?" "You already know how to teach their prayers," Thorin said. "Let Feely and Killy remain with you to continue learning. I also want them trained in combat by Nephili Lux. I'll pay whatever tuition she asks. Speak to her for me." Tarns agreed readily to keep teaching the prayers. "Of course, as for Nephili, I can ask. I can't promise." "Tarnas?" Thorin's smile was quick, decisive. "I don't wish to waste time." He declined Tarns's invitation to lunch, gathered a few empty carriages, and left without delay. Feely and Keely watched each other, confused. They had expected to be taken back with him. "Teacher Tarns," Feely asked timidly, "did Uncle Thorin get angry with us and leave us here?" Keely nodded frantically, looking near tears. Tarns laughed and waved the worry away. "Thorin's not abandoning you. He's going back because he needs to convene the Dwarven Council and finalize preparations." He left you here because he wants you to continue learning prayers with me and ask that Nephili teach your combat. Relief flooded Keely's face. Feely's forehead remained creased, thoughtful. Is something wrong in the Blue Mountains? He asked quietly. No, Tarnas said, smiling. He simply realized there's much to prepare. You two stay and study. Don't fret. Tarnes finished the last document he had to sign, then suggested they demonstrate their progress. Since you're here, go out to the courtyard and show me how your beast prayers are coming along. In the courtyard, the brothers performed well. They had mastered the early beast prayers, beast claw, beast stone, wild beast vitality, and beast strength, though not Gurang's beast claw and Gurang's beast stone. Feely panted when they finished. These are all the prayers Killy and I have learned, he told Tarns. Half a week ago, we began studying the rest from the book, but we couldn't make sense of them. Killy rubbed his eyes. You told us Gurang's story, teacher, but we still can't learn the prayers named for him. Tarnas nodded with understanding. Gurang's name had once been tied to the death of a demigod. The prayers bearing his name were not ordinary. Tarns himself had learned those techniques directly from Gurang. The brothers, relying on only texts and illustrations, couldn't be expected to pick them up quickly. He encouraged them gently. Don't be discouraged. You've learned more than half. The rest will come with time. As a teacher, he felt he could do more. Perhaps Selen might have a better method. Tarns made his way to Stormvile and to Selen's room. She'd moved from the inn into the keep. He knocked and heard her calm voice. Come in. The door's unlocked. Mind your step and don't touch the glintstones and books. The room was a chaotic spread of papers, glintstones, and strange objects. Heavy curtains blocked the light, and a woman stood at the far end, hair black and long, without her sorceress's hood. Selen's face lit at the sight of Tarns. My dear apprentice, she said, half teasing, to what do I owe the pleasure? Tarns surveyed the mess. Someone should tidy this place. If a stranger tidied it, I'd lose everything, Selen replied, amused. She smiled faintly. If you, my apprentice, helped, I might not object. I'm not here to clean, Tarns said. I have a question. He explained Feely and Keely's difficulty. Selen listened, then shook her head gently. Tarnas, do you really think everyone can learn prayers and glintstone magic as fast as you seem to? Tarnans looked puzzled. Selen, amused at his confusion, set that remark aside. She reached under a glintstone and produced a blue scroll, unrolling it and pointing to a passage. Let the dwarves be for now, she said. They'll learn eventually. Come look, this is a new finding. Tarnas stepped closer. Selen's finger traced the words. We've long thought dwarves could not learn glintstone magic, she said. That's true. She let the silence hang for a moment, then added with a slight smile. But elves can. Selen's discovery lay there on the scroll, its implication as plain as the ink. The door to glintstone magic remained closed to dwarves, but swung open to elves. Chapter 44. It's not like you to hesitate. When Tarns heard Selen's words, he raised an eyebrow, looked at his teacher, and held up the blue scroll in his hand. Teacher Selen, he said, from the way you speak, it sounds like you've already verified this. What's on the scroll isn't speculation, it's actual data, right? He knew Selen well enough to be certain she wouldn't leave a theory untested. Otherwise, she wouldn't have earned the witch title at Raya Lucarian Academy. Selen didn't apologize. She smiled with a trace of smugness. Correct. This records data on elves using glintstone magic. Don't worry, I didn't push them into high-level spells. I only taught them some of the most basic glintstone techniques, nothing that would endanger their lives. Selen clearly knew her obedient apprentice's temperament and had restrained herself during the verification. Tarns caught the plural in her phrasing and asked, Wait, them? You found more than one elf for the experiment? Of course, Selen replied as if it were obvious. You need multiple subjects to confirm a pattern. One person could be an anomaly. I used at least 3. Tarns sighed. Next time you run an experiment like this, tell me. I could at least be there to ensure the elves' safety. Did you warn them about potential risks? Selen shrugged. I told them it was basic glintstone magic. Even if it failed, it wouldn't harm them. I also explained the possible outcomes. They weighed the risks and agreed. What did you tell them, exactly? Tarns pressed. I said simply that, since dwarves couldn't learn it, I wanted to teach some glintstone magic from your homeland to see whether elves could. They agreed right away. Selen sounded pleased with the persuasive simplicity of her approach. Tarns inwardly winced. Of course, she framed it that way. Still, he asked, so what did they learn? How many kinds of glintstone magic? Starlight and glintstone pebble, Selen said after thinking for a moment. I haven't taught them anything else. A flicker of puzzlement crossed her face. One thing that surprised me was that they asked if I could teach glintstone usable in close combat. I'm not some Heima classroom fanatic, so I didn't teach them any battlefield tricks. Tarns almost smiled at the familiarity of it. When he'd spoken with Fili and Kili, the two dwarves had also shown a strong preference for close-range prayers. People across Middle-earth did seem to favor the direct approach. He suppressed a private complaint and watched Selen hand the blue scroll back and set it down on the table. Are you free now? She asked. Talking won't give you a clear picture. Your magical aptitude isn't inferior to mine. Since you care about the elves' safety, come with me and see them. Tarns checked his day's tasks and saw he was nearly finished. Looks like I'm having lunch with my teacher today, he said with a wry smile. They left at once. Tarns summoned Tourette, and the two of them rode together. Selen sat behind him, resting a hand on his shoulder. They weren't delayed getting to the elven dwelling. Selen pointed ahead. There they are. You don't have to tell me, Tarns said. He had already noticed the three elves, each with a small sky-blue orb of starlight hovering above their heads and lightly touching the others. The graceful image of elves he'd held in his mind was, if only a little, altered by the sight. The elves noticed them and approached quickly. Good afternoon, Lord Tarns. Lady Selen. The lead elf bowed with elegant economy. Tarns waited for Selen to dismount first before returning the greeting and recalling Tourette. I hope we aren't intruding. The lead elf's features were androgynous until he smiled. Then Tarns realized he was male. I suppose you're here about my compatriots studying glintstone magic? Tarns nodded. I'm concerned about any adverse effects on their bodies after learning glintstone. That's why I'm here. You are very kind, Lord Tarns, the elf replied. Eileen, Cairn, Melshan, come. They hardly needed calling. The two males and one female came forward, blue orbs still hovering. Tarns felt a touch embarrassed by the light bathing their faces and golden hair in blue. It looked almost comical. Could you cancel that effect for now? He asked, rubbing his forehead. The three exchanged looks, lifted their hands, and the magical light vanished. Tarns noted that none of them held staves. Their hands were empty. He glanced at Selen, who only smiled. That's what I wanted you to see, she said. Tarns put his questions on hold and suggested, let's go to an open area, and you can demonstrate your glintstone for me. Behind the elves' dwellings, a wide, green meadow spread out. Tarns stood at the edge while the elves gathered. With nothing more than a lift of their hands, a faint blue glow gathered in each palm, and small glintstone pebbles formed and shot outward, trailing elegant wisps. They could really cast without a staff. The sight unsettled Tarns. It challenged what he thought he knew. But he reminded himself this was another world. New phenomena were to be expected. More important than the casting itself was whether it had after effects. Tarns stepped forward and asked, do you feel any discomfort after casting? Like a drain on your stamina? Selen answered for him from beside him. I ask that. They don't suffer the kind of physical exhaustion dwarves experience when casting prayers. We don't feel our bodies physically drained, Melshan said politely, bowing with a hand to his chest. Allow me to introduce ourselves properly. I am Melshan. This is Cairn, and that is his sister Eileen. Cairn's golden hair and Eileen's tied-up style were as fair as a song. Melshan continued, we learned from Master Selen that casting glintstone from your homeland requires expending something from oneself. The dwarves can only tap into physical fortitude. We are different. After discussing it, we agreed to call what we expend mental power. Mental power? Tarns echoed, intrigued. Melshan nodded with a small smile. Yes, if we cast continuously, our heads grow heavy and we become sleepy. There's no physical exhaustion per se, but we get an overwhelming need to sleep in order to recover. So using glintstone too much leads to a state like severe sleepiness. Tarns let out a breath. Selen stepped closer, studying the elves, and said with a smile, Elven bodies are curious and wondrous, aren't they? So near perfection, they seem the creator's favorites. Melchion accepted the praise with a graceful incline of his head. Tarnas had been about to agree, until he remembered something. He pulled Selen aside to a more private spot and lowered his voice. Teacher Selen, please don't get any ideas about swapping bodies with the elves. I think original forms are best. Selen blinked at his seriousness, then laughed. Apprentice, what are you thinking? Elves are unlike the people of the lands between, just as glintstone differs from storm battle techniques. How could I possibly want an elven body? Tarns felt some relief despite an odd little sting at her tone. That's good, he admitted. After declining the elves' invitation to stay for dinner, Tarns rode Selen back to Stormvale Castle. As they arrived, Nephili was coming in too. Odd, since Tarns thought she was still on patrol. Afternoon sunlight slanted through the high windows of the City Lord Hall and set the marble aglow. Selen and Nephili had no shared topic, and Selen excused herself, leaving Tarns and Nephili standing in the airy hall. Footsteps approached, and a maid set down a golden tray with 2 steaming cups of tea. Tarns gestured his thanks. After a moment, he broke the silence. Thorin asked me to see if you could teach Fili and Kili some combat techniques, like you taught Dwalin. He offered payment for the lessons. Nephili considered, then shook her head. Tarnas waited patiently for her to explain. She cleared her throat. It's not that I don't want to teach, but I'm not good at instructing. Thorin treasures Fili and Kili. They deserve someone more professional than me. But in the Golden Tree's territories, your close-quarters combat is unparalleled, Tarnas pointed out. Nephili smiled. Can't you reach into the lands between via the Golden Tree? I remember a stout fellow in Nimfor who lives in a dilapidated shack. He often enthusiastically teaches passing tarnished battle skills. Tarns felt his heart skip. The description conjured a middle-aged man in well-worn silver armor with a stubbled face. Nephili supplied the name from memory. Bernal. I remember he said his name was Bernal. Tarna's expression tightened. Nephili looked puzzled. Is there something wrong, Tarnas? There was a problem. Tarnas let out a slow breath and spoke carefully. It's normal you don't know him. Bernal and I have a complicated history. I don't even know whether he's my friend, my teacher, or my enemy. Early on, when Tarns was still new and inexperienced in the lands between, Bernal had taught him many things, enough that the title teacher would not have been unjustified. Nephili listened, then said bluntly, My foster father didn't let me read many books, so I won't sound wise. But if someone had such a ambiguous relationship with me, I'd take my battle axe and the storm in my hand and demand answers. That's the last thing I can do as a warrior. Why not summon Bernal and face him? She paused and softened her tone. You're not the same as the Tarns I remember. Hesitation isn't like you. The Tarns I knew would confront a threat, even if fear was there. Bernal may not even be your enemy, and whatever happens, I swore I'd stand by you. Face it, and I'll stand at your side. Tarns couldn't help but laugh. You're consoling me, Nephili, and you're right. My mindset has shifted since what I have to protect has grown. But I went through the same when I became Storm King, Nephili said approvingly. Tarns inhaled deeply and let his expression sharpen. All right, I'll go to the Golden Tree and try to summon Bernal. Bernal had been planned as part of Tarns' dragon-slaying expedition. As a quasi-king, he would have been summoned sooner or later. Nephili's words pushed Tarns to face this older acquaintance sooner rather than later. First, he needed to consult the Elden Ring to see whether he could reach the dilapidated shack in Nemfor. Then, if the pathway opened, he would attempt to summon Bernal through it. Chapter 45. Bernal. When the War Master's shack vanished in a wash of golden light and rematerialized in the Golden Tree's courtyard, Tarns immediately noticed that Bernal's name, which had been grayed out, began to glow. He checked the blessings the Golden Tree had accumulated over the past few days. There were more than enough to summon Bernal. Tarns had originally intended to use these blessings to call more banished knights and exiled soldiers from Stormvale Castle, but the farmland's food supply had reached its limit and he had to pause summoning until more land could be cultivated. The misbegotten settled far away in Takrundale still needed provisioning. Their territory lay beyond the Golden Tree's influence, so Moan City would have to supply them until they became self-sufficient. If Takrandale could be rebuilt and the old port reopened, the sea's wealth would be enormous. And if Shabard to the north were reactivated, the whole Greywater River waterway might return to its former prosperity. Come, Bernal. Tarns focused on the name in his mind and confirmed the summon. A faint ripple broke the courtyard's stillness, and a blurred figure gradually solidified. A middle-aged man in silver beast champion heavy armor stood there, armor plain rather than ornate. His grizzled hair was tied into a short braid, stubble darkened his chin, and gray strands hung by his temples. The golden tree's branches swayed, splintering light and shadow across his weathered face. This was Bernal, a demilord in strength, a man who had once been fated for kingship. His arrival caused no fanfare. He merely stood in the courtyard like any other summoned warrior. Bernal opened his eyes. Silver-gray pupils met Tarns's, and a torrent of displaced memories flooded him, but his expression remained as calm and still as lake water. He stood there, immovable, like a mountain risen anew. Time had carved deep furrows into his face, and the wind moved through the empty courtyard, rustling golden leaves. They regarded one another in silence. Nephili Lu appeared at the gate, moving silently with brisk, sure steps. Her calloused hand brushed the haft of the axe at her waist. She stood beside Tarns, unbowed, and gave Bernal a hard, assessing look. Bernal chuckled softly at the sight, an echo of comradeship from old days at the Round Table Hold, but the laugh was lined with regret. He scanned the courtyard slowly, searching for familiar landmarks. He noted he stood within Stormvale Castle, yet the sky was not the one he remembered, nor was the golden tree behind Tarns the same. "This isn't the lands between anymore, is it, Tarns?" he asked, voice tangled with disbelief. Tarns nodded once. "No," Bernal's gaze sharpened. "It's obvious. The golden tree behind you is too small." "It will grow," Tarnis said. "It will become a towering tree." Bernal's question came abrupt and blunt. "Where is your maiden? The girl who always hid her face beneath a hood and followed you?" The words hit Tarnis like a blow. For an instant, a suffocating pressure closed his chest. His heartbeat thundered in his ears as though he could hear Melina's voice calling his name. Bernal's silver-gray eyes flashed dangerous light. "You didn't set her to burn the tree too, did you?" He put heavy emphasis on the last word. Pain flickered across his face. Tarns held his silence. He knew Bernal was testing the conversation, trying to rattle him. Instead, he turned the question back. "Bernal, if there were even the faintest chance to bring your maiden back, what would you do?" Bernal was for a moment speechless, stunned as if time had stilled around him. Then his eyes flared with a terrible, coiled fury. "Of course I would go and revive her," he said, low and unyielding. "Even if I must trample a path of blood, stain my hands with innocents' blood, take upon myself their curses, I would not hesitate. My soul has been blackened since the moment I lost her." Rage and grief danced in his pupils, each word a hammered certitude. Tarns stepped forward and pointed to himself. "I am that slim possibility, Bernal. The Elden Ring came with me into this world and brought everything from the lands between with it. You must remember fighting me and being killed by me, yet here you stand alive. You know what that implies." Bernal's eyes narrowed, sarcasm coiled beneath his voice. "That doesn't make me some dog of the Golden Order. The Golden Order. Ha! I will not forget that it was the damned Golden Order that made my maiden sacrifice herself. And for what? For such a ridiculous outcome." He jabbed a finger at Tarns. "Tarns, didn't you and I once sit as judges? Are you now prepared to be the Golden Order's lapdog? Tell me, you who hold the Elden Ring, you who became Elden Lord, what is your law now?" Tarns understood what Bernal truly hated, the Golden Order, the system that had betrayed him. He answered without hesitation. "My law? It is not the flawed Golden Order. I met an old, righteous soldier in the Shadowland who asked me the same thing before he died. I swear on my soul, my law and my reason for kingship are for the people of the lands between, not for the gods." He extended his hand. "I summoned you because I am rebuilding the lands between. I need your strength. Join me, Bernal." Bernal chewed on the words for a long moment. "Not for the gods, but for the people of the lands between? If you don't believe me," Tarnis said, "you can step out of Stormvale Castle and see for yourself." Bernal's chest rose and fell. The old fire returned to his eyes, Not the skeptical challenge this time, but the desire to test his strength. That alone isn't enough. If you want me to join, you know the rules of the lands between. Tarn smiled and produced two identical knight's greatswords in his hands. He handed one to Bernal with a teasing edge. You lost to me 8 times. Do you still want to fight? Bernal swung the greatsword a few times, as though it were weightless, and snorted. You never beat me by sword alone. What glintstone magic or prayers do you plan this round? Tarnas blinked. I'll tell you, if you'll believe me. Bernal gave a wry, guarded smile. What would you have me think? Tarnas glanced around. Perhaps we should change location. I don't want our duel to ruin this beautiful courtyard. Bernal shrugged. You pick. Even if you want Volcano Manor and lava to glaze everything, I won't object. I'd never pick that, Tarn said with mock offense. Only someone like you enjoys bathing in lava. He beckoned to Nephili. Nephili, go fetch Fili and Kili. Tell them I'm going to spar with their future battle skill teacher and to meet us on the open ground outside the main gate. Nephili looked surprised. With their personalities, I'm afraid even the dwarves will come to watch. Then so much the better, Tarn said. Let the dwarven friends see Bernal's strength. It'll save me from having to explain it later on Thorin's expedition. If any elf friends can come too, all the better. Bernal frowned. Explain to me, what does future battle skill teacher mean, and who are Fili and Kili? Tarnas motioned for Nephili to leave and said to Bernal, It's a long story. Come with me. I'll explain on the way. Nephili quickly sent letters, and the Stormhawks were launched to Moan City and Castle Hate to fetch Fili and Kili, who had been staying at Stormvale Castle temporarily. Word spread through the Golden Tree's territory that their lord was to spar. As they walked, Tarns filled Bernal in on what had happened since he'd come to this world, and on the dwarves and elves he'd met. You summoned me only to be a battle skill instructor for 2 dwarves? Bernal asked, an odd expression on his face. Tarns shook his head. Not just that. Later, I and 2 others will join an expedition led by a dwarf king to reclaim his homeland. He's a new friend. When I first arrived here and needed help, he supplied me generously. That's partly why Stormvale Castle stands as it does. Bernal sighed, uncertain whether to laugh or be rueful. It's only right to return favors and value loyalty. I don't mind helping your friend. It's just, when you summoned me, you looked as if you were about to slit my throat at any second. I thought you intended harm. I didn't expect you simply wanted me to teach. You could have said so. Tarnans didn't tell him that the expression had been the residue of a cruel private question that had been asked the moment Bernal appeared. He was simply relieved. Bernal was not openly hostile, and Tarns did not want to sever the bond between them. Bernal watched Tarns's lighter step and warned, Don't get careless, because I'm not hostile. I won't hold back. Even if it's called a spar, I fight to win. How could I underestimate you? Tarnas said, eyes bright with eagerness. I'm looking forward to it. You battle maniac, Bernal said dryly. He hesitated, voice wavering slightly. But what you told me back in the Golden Tree courtyard, this slight chance of reviving my witch, were you sincere? Or were you trying to soothe me with false hope? Bernal had braced himself to be told he'd been lied to. He knew Tarnas as cunning in battle, but also as a man who did not lie on matters that truly mattered. Under Bernal's hopeful look, Tarnas answered, The Elden Ring contains everything from the lands between. There's a good chance your witch's soul is among it. Even if she's not, don't lose hope. There's something about Farum Azula you don't know. Bernal's mind filled with the vision of the ancient sky city surrounded by storms. He pressed, What is it? Ancient Dragon Lord Placidus Axe is still alive, Tarns said. He sits at the heart of the storm in Farum Azula. That storm is a temporal rift. We may be able to use that rift to find the moment when your witch's soul had not yet dispersed. Bernal's gaze hardened at that. Underneath his outward composure, suspicion churned. This tarnished who had bested him 8 times might be plotting to take his life without declaring it. Tarnas, for his part, felt the old wariness flare. Bernal's grief over his lost maiden could be a weapon. Each man calculated the other in silence, neither willing to show the full weight of his doubts. They walked on toward the gate, past the Golden Tree's faint light, and out into the wide world, each carrying his own wary resolve. Chapter 46. Pray Before Fighting. Aren't there a few too many people? Bernal asked, watching the crowd outside Stormvale Castle. Tarns followed his gaze. Fili and Kili stood among a cluster of dwarves who had come with them, waving and cheering. More than I expected, Tarns said. Feels like everyone in the Golden Tree territory showed up, except for the patrolling soldiers. Bernal spotted the two short figures and squinted. Those the dwarves you mentioned? Is the student you assigned to me here? Yeah, Tarns said. See the two shortest bearded ones up front, one with golden hair, one with black? That's them. Bernal raised an eyebrow. They're unmistakable. Their presence is different from other dwarves, and they're surprisingly good-looking for dwarves. Pity they're so short. Tarns shrugged. Don't underestimate them. Small doesn't mean weak. Dwarves have incredible strength, balance, and agility. They're stubborn, too. You'll never be able to predict everything they'll do. Bernal turned his attention to the elves opposite the dwarves. Those long-eared ones are elves? They're all so elegant I can't tell male from female. Tarns snorted. Same here. They dress and style themselves so delicately you can't tell until they speak. The crowd parted as Tarns walked a few steps forward and turned to face Bernal. People instinctively made space for the two to spar. Bernal tightened his grip on his greatsword. The tip trembled. The knight's greatsword that would be a challenge for an ordinary person to wield with both hands he lifted easily in one hand, the point leveled at Tarns. Tarns mirrored him, raising an identical blade until their tips met. They fell into a silent agreement and stepped back 4 sword lengths in near-perfect unison. The noisy spectators quieted as a pressure settled over the two men. Even the dwarves and elves retreated. Fili and Kili, however, stayed put. Nefili Lu had told the two brothers that this silver-armored warrior facing Tarns would be their future battle skill teacher. They refused to show weakness at their first meeting with Bernal. They were trembling, sweating cold, but they did not step back. I admit, you were right about dwarves, Bernal said, amused. These two princes are a sight. Terrified out of their wits, but refusing to retreat. They're trying to cheer you on, aren't they? Tarns's expression grew serious. Even after beating Bernal 8 times, he treated a quasi-lord with proper respect. He allowed himself a small smile. They're my students. Of course they stayed. Bernal narrowed his eyes. Then as the newcomer, I should show them which of their 2 teachers is the stronger. High on the castle wall above the main gate, 2 banished knights who'd rushed over from patrol stood with shining eyes. A duel between an Elden Lord and a quasi-lord was rare. They did not want to miss this. Nefili Lu, unaffected by the pair's oppressive presence, stepped forward and stood in front of Fili and Kili, letting the 2 dwarves relax a little. They breathed raggedly, wiping cold sweat from their brows. Thank you, City Lord Nefili, Fili said. Kili, half panic, half excitement, asked, Is this Tarna-sensei's true strength? Just standing here makes him feel like a mountain. Getting closer would freeze me with cold wind from the peak. Nefili only nodded and then called out loudly, Do you want me to be the referee? Tarns agreed immediately. Bernal inclined his head at Nefili. It would be an honor to have the newly appointed Storm King witness this match. Understood, Nefili said. She drew her war axe. Golden lightning gathered on the blade. These 2 are powerful enough that a decisive victory could cause casualties. Let's make this clean. The first to disarm the other, the one whose greatsword is knocked away, loses. Agreed? As a warrior, Tarns replied without hesitation, losing your weapon is like losing your life. I agree. Bernal chimed in. I couldn't agree more. Having your weapon taken is the same as offering your neck. Nefili raised her axe. Then let thunder be the signal. They nodded and prepared. Fili and Kili held their breath, picturing the clash of 2 greatswords and the sparks the impact would send flying. Nefili swung. Lightning trailed in the air, but the thunderclap reached everyone's ears before the afterimage. The duel had begun. For a heartbeat, everyone expected charging blades, a sudden clash. Instead, in a coordinated motion, both Tarns and Bernal knelt. Time to pray. Murmurs rippled through the crowd, then fell silent as Fili and Kili suddenly understood. The 2 men were casting prayers. 1 knee on the ground was the posture required. Golden light flared from their hands and spread over their bodies. The golden tree behind them shone brighter, its branches shedding falling motes of light. Tarns and Bernal had first used a low-tier prayer, a goal, that boosted physical attributes, and then rose, exchanged a glance, and dropped to kneel once more. This time, the Golden Tree flared even more. They were casting Golden Tree Protection, a higher-tier prayer that lent considerable defense. When they rose the second time, a warm golden radiance enveloped their armor, bodies, and weapons. Tarnas understood Bernal well after their 8 matches. Bernal always took time to cast prayers before dueling him. If Tarns had been using a heavier weapon, he might have refused to pray and charged instead. But charging into Bernal right after Bernal finished his prayers, when Bernal's beast-gathering armor favored him, would be foolish. Bernal's silver-gray eyes reflected the golden glow. "You didn't draw a staff this time," he said with mild surprise. Tarns was about to reply that he'd wanted a head-on fight when Bernal suddenly executed a weird flourish, a New Year's greeting sword art, slamming his greatsword into the ground. Tarnas's comment died on his lips as he leapt aside. The ground between them split silently. Invisible blades carved 2 wounds into the earth. The attack came from Bernal, battle skill, vacuum slash. Fili and Kili gaped in disbelief. The elves behind them exchanged stunned looks. Melcian, who practiced glintstone magic, leaned closer to the elven siblings, Cairn and Irene. "Did you see that? Did he just make air vanish like that?" Cairn and Irene stared, their pupils trembling. Cairn swallowed. "I don't know if I actually saw it. It was so clear it felt unreal." He raised his sword, then the air vanished and 2 invisible slashes formed. Irene added, "We should ask Tarnas. He was the one who dodged it." Melcian nodded. They watched, unsettled, as Bernal pressed the advantage. He used Quickstep to close the gap in an instant. 10 meters vanished. He was at Tarns' side in a flash. He planted his right foot and twisted, bringing his sword around in a counterblow, battle skill, spinning slash. The blow should have split Tarns' waist. Instead, Bernal felt recoil bite at his hand, as if his blade had struck an immovable object. His grip nearly failed, his balance wavered. Tarns hissed, mildly annoyed, "Your beast-gathering armor is heavy. It didn't even knock you onto your rear." Bernal sprang back and slipped the follow-up strike. Tarns clicked his tongue, noting with interest Bernal's other hand. Where had a shield come from? A small round silver shield had appeared in Tarns' free hand. At the crucial moment, it had intercepted Bernal's unexpected slash. Battle skill, parry. Tarns' eyes shone with fighting fervor. Close-quarters combat exhilarated him in a way it hadn't in a long time. He grinned. "I'm not stupid. In the last 8 matches, you read my glintstone patterns. If I couldn't counter, I'd have to question the gold content in your quasi-lord title." Had Tarns relied on glintstone magic, Bernal's vacuum slash would have struck home. Bernal saw the fire in Tarns' eyes and couldn't help but smile in return. "You fanatic," he snapped. "And you're one to call me that," Tarns shot back. Both of them were grinning now, matching each other's intensity. Bernal touched his mouth as if surprised at himself, tightened his grip on his greatsword, and then, mirroring Tarns' expression, used Quickstep to rush in. "You've been running and throwing glintstone tricks around long enough. Time to get a good beating." Swords met again. When the one who always kited you finally insists on fighting face-to-face, the whole rhythm of the duel changes. Chapter 47. Is this really not just taking a beating? Kili no longer remembered exactly how the duel between Tarns and Bernal ended. All he knew was that his eyes could no longer follow the 2 figures the moment the clash of steel stopped and one of the knightly greatswords flew free and skidded across the grass. Who had won? He looked quickly and saw Tarns and Bernal standing overlapped, their bodies blocking a clear view of who had lost his weapon. They didn't keep the spectators waiting long. The 2 knights separated. Tarns still held his greatsword. Bernal's hands were empty. "Victory is decided. Elden Lord Tarns has defeated Quasi-Lord Bernal. Let us cheer for Tarns and applaud Bernal for his courage." Nefili Lu called out, bringing the duel to an end. Fili and Kili were the first to cheer, clapping and whooping. The rest of the golden lineage followed suit. The elves offered polite, graceful applause. Bernal showed no anger, only satisfaction. The only thing that irked him was that this was the 9th time he'd lost to Tarns. "I didn't expect you to know that Bloodspoke Knight's hound step," Bernal said with a rueful sigh. I thought someone who specializes in glintstone magic wouldn't be much at close combat. I misjudged you. Because Bernal had let his guard down, convinced Tarns couldn't handle close quarters work, Tarns had seized a moment to vanish behind him with the hound step. Bernal had reacted fast, swinging his greatsword back to defend, but it had been a moment when old reflexes faltered and new ones hadn't yet taken over. The weapon slipped from his grasp. Tarns, meanwhile, sheathed his sword, smiled, and said humbly, "I only dabbled in different styles to pass the time. In pure swordsmanship, you're still slightly better. You lost to the unexpected. Besides, you've still got that world-devouring scepter of yours, right?" Bernal shook his head and shrugged modestly. "A true enemy wouldn't reveal their whole hand. I lost. Simple as that. It's just that I'm not as skilled. And no, this has nothing to do with the scepter. Counting this one, I've lost to you 9 times. The crowd thinned. Nefili picked up the fallen greatsword and returned it to Tarns, who tested its weight a few times before slipping it into its sheath and handing it back to Bernal. "I still prefer you with a greatsword," Tarns said. Bernal took the weapon without ceremony, slung it on his back, and replied, "My sorceress likes how I look with a sword. But never mind, aren't you going to call those 2 dwarves who won't leave?" Tarnas looked and realized Fili and Kili were still standing where everyone else had dispersed. He waved them over. Fili nudged Kili, and the 2 dwarves hurried forward, looking up at the 2 knights with wide, admiring eyes. "I think Nefili introduced him," Tarns said. "This is the battle skill teacher I found for you. You just saw what he can do. If you even learn 10% of his techniques, Thorin will see you differently." That had been part of the point of Tarnas's duel, to let Bernal display his swordsmanship fully. It also helped Tarns understand why Nefili had recommended Bernal. Nefili herself fought well with an axe and didn't use prayers in combat, so she could teach a dwarf who fought without prayers. But Fili and Kili had already learned prayers with Tarnans. Teaching them only axe work and not how to integrate prayers would be a waste. Bernal bowed slightly, and the brothers shouted in unison, "Teacher Bernal!" Bernal stroked his chin, approached, and pressed firmly on both of their shoulders. Fili and Kili felt a strange downward force, as if the man were testing their balance. They braced their legs and barely swayed. Very sturdy bodies," Bernal said, releasing them. "You 2 have been training." He smiled. The first impression was good. If he'd toppled them, he'd have had to work on their lower body stability first. Tarns grinned. "I told you, you can trust dwarven balance. Your little trick wouldn't faze them." Bernal glanced at him. "How I teach my apprentices is my business," he said. Tarns shrugged and asked, "Do you still have that Red Dew Holy Grail bottle?" Bernal produced an exquisite glass bottle filled with red liquid that flashed faintly with gold. Tarnas nodded. "Good, feed them the grace due from it when needed. To refresh it, leave it in the Golden Tree's courtyard for half an hour. As long as nothing happens to them, teach them your way." Bernal pocketed the bottle. "Understood." Fili and Kili blinked, not following the subtext of Tarns and Bernal's conversation. Bernal waved at Tarns. "I'm free right now. Let's begin. Help me find a quiet, uncrowded, spacious courtyard. If you're busy, go on with your duties." "The military training ground inside Stormvale Castle will do," Tarns said. He led them toward the area where the banished knights and exiled soldiers were quartered. 2 cloaked sentries bowed to Tarns and Nefili and moved a chevaux de frise to let them pass. Nefili split off to check on the exiled soldiers' training. After all, as Storm King, the soldiers were under her direct command now, not just Tarns' temporary oversight. Tarns brought Bernal and the 2 dwarves to a secluded training yard with the afternoon sun cutting through the clouds. Armor and blades shone neatly in the adjacent armory. "Fili, Kili, good luck. Bernal's an excellent teacher. He taught me. I look forward to the day you graduate." "We won't disgrace you, Teacher Tarnas," Fili said politely. "Right, Fili and I will train hard," Kili added confidently. Bernal smiled at their enthusiasm. Tarnas said he'd arrange rooms for them and hesitated, then warned, "Don't scare them too much, Bernal. Tone it down." Bernal waved. "Got it. Don't worry. Oh, and make sure they have meat for dinner." Tarnas left reassured. Fili and Kili exchanged puzzled glances. "Why did Tarns say Bernal would scare us?" they whispered. Bernal clapped his hands and beamed. suddenly alive with excitement as he introduced himself. Let me reintroduce myself properly. My name is Bernal. Feely, at your service, Feely blurted. Keely, likewise, Keely added. Bernal laughed and raised a hand. Wait, I'm still speaking. You're the excited one, Feely teased, but Keely only flushed and looked contrite. Bernal settled, took the greatsword off his back, and rested the scabbard on the ground. I only know the sword, he said, and I've devoted myself to battle skills. I want to pass them on, to people like Tarnas, and now to you two. Feely brightened. When do we start? Bernal strode into the armory, poked among the weapons, then came back with a decision. All right, first lesson. Come and punch me. Feely and Keely stared. Bernal didn't pick up his sword. He crossed his arms over his chest and said, I won't fight back. Attack. Don't hold back. After a moment's hesitation, the brothers nodded and charged. Small, stocky, and armed with fists rather than blades, they barreled in. Feely slipped behind Keely mid-sprint, and Keely used that momentum to leap higher than their stature usually allowed, bringing a heavy fist down toward Bernal's face. Bernal's eyes flashed. Then his body shuddered, and there was a dull thud. Keely had expected Bernal to block. Instead, his fist slammed into Bernal's right cheek, and Bernal didn't move. His head didn't snap. He simply stood there, as if nothing had happened. Feely covered his mouth in shock. Keely rolled to his feet, stunned, and his own fist had gone red. Why did you punch Teacher Bernal in the face? Feely hissed. I thought he'd block it, Keely replied, bewildered. You used too much force. Look at your hand. You probably knocked out a few of his teeth, Feely whispered. Bernal laughed, drawing their attention. Don't worry, that was on purpose. Feely rushed an apology. Sorry, Teacher Bernal, we were rough. Like I said, it was deliberate, Bernal said, smiling and tapping his cheek. The spot where Keely's blow had landed was only faintly reddened. Watch closely. That was the battle skill endurance. Endurance, the brothers exclaimed. Feely frowned. Endurance? Is that really a battle skill? Keely echoed, bewildered. Yeah, seems like just taking a beating. Bernal only grinned, pleased to have his students' interest piqued. Chapter 48. A Teacher Obsessed with Battle Skills. Bernal motioned for Feely and Keely to be quiet and explained patiently. Listen, this battle skill is a stance you form in your mind. You lower your center of gravity, plant yourself, and for an instant your defense skyrockets and the damage you take is greatly reduced. Keely still found Bernal's words a little hard to believe, but he hesitated and turned to Feely for guidance. Feely, on the other hand, was trying to recall how Bernal had looked when Keely had punched him earlier. If his memory was right, Bernal had not flinched at all. Could Bernal be telling the truth? Feely remained skeptical. If you don't believe me, try it on each other, Bernal said. Keely, punch Feely the way you punched me. Feely, try to use the endurance battle skill like I explained. Keely's eyes lit up. Really? Feely shot his younger brother a look of disbelief. Wait, if I fail to use the skill, I'm just going to get punched for nothing. Keely thought for a moment and grinned confidently. Then I won't punch your face. Feely's eyes widened. Bernal urged them on. Come on, hurry up. If you think Keely can't do it, I'll do it myself. Feely glanced at Bernal and saw him fidgeting with the hilt of a greatsword stuck in the ground. He hurriedly said, No need. Keely can do it. Teacher Bernal, could you repeat the instructions one more time? Of course. Listen carefully, both of you. After Feely tries it, it'll be your turn, Keely. Feely took a breath, crossed his arms in front of him, and copied the defensive posture Bernal had shown. Bernal, seeing his hesitation, added, It's hard to describe what success feels like. When your body momentarily feels as hard as steel, that's when it worked. If nothing else helps, keep repeating the name of the battle skill in your head. Feely nodded and signaled to Keely. Keely didn't hesitate this time and threw a punch straight at Feely's face. Feely mentally chanted, Endurance! 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 He watched Keely's fist grow larger in his vision and felt his heart tense. Just before the blow landed, Feely felt his body lock, suddenly solid and unyielding. An odd sound came from inside him. Success, he thought. The punch stung. Bright, burning pain flared across Feely's cheek, and he briefly blacked out. But his body didn't collapse the way it normally would have. The impact had only jolted his head. His golden-orange braids and short beard swayed, but he stayed standing. Bernal smiled. Good. You caught on quickly and used endurance successfully. One thing I forgot to tell you. Endurance reduces the damage taken, but it doesn't change the pain you feel. Feely clenched his jaw and forced himself not to cry out. He raised his face, forced a smile through the pain, and said through gritted teeth, "Keely, your turn." Keely blinked, then understood what Philly had in mind. "Teacher Bernal, can I learn a different battle skill instead?" he asked. "No," Bernal and Philly said at the same time, both grinning at Keely. After a few muffled protests, the dwarf brothers finally had a practical grasp of the mechanics of battle skill endurance. Bernal warned them seriously, even if you master endurance, don't go trading blows with enemies unless you have to. It won't make you invulnerable. Feely collapsed to the ground, spent and managed. "We understand, Teacher Bernal." Bernal took in their bruised, exhausted faces, then produced a red dew Holy Grail bottle. He handed it to Feely. "Tarn's told you what this does, right? Drink it, restore your stamina, and get ready for the next practice." Both brothers looked resigned at the prospect of more training, and now they understood why Tarns had looked at them with sympathy and urged Bernal to be restrained. They each took a sip of the red dew. Their spent energy returned almost immediately. Bruises and aches healed as they had before. Bernal watched them stand again, mentally readjusted and ready for the next lesson, and smiled approvingly. "Good. What skill would you like to learn next?" "If you don't say, I'll choose." Feely, afraid Bernal would make them practice another painful skill, quickly asked, "Teacher Bernal, could you teach us the move you used to slash at Teacher Tarns in your first spar?" Bernal thought for a moment. "Oh, you mean vacuum slash." Both dwarves nodded eagerly. The idea of an invisible, powerful attack fascinated them. Bernal shook his head, though. "At your current level, vacuum slash is difficult. If I taught it to you now, you wouldn't be able to generate its true power. To master it properly, you need to learn the basics first. Unless what?" Killy asked. Bernal looked at him. "Unless you wield a weapon that already has vacuum slash attached. With such a weapon, you can skip learning the skill from scratch." He glanced toward the direction Tarns had left the training ground. "Of the people I know, only Tarns seems to own such a weapon. He and a very skilled blacksmith worked together to inscribe the battle skill into it." Feely's thoughts went straight to Thorin's frozen shell axe, the battle axe his uncle treasured. He had heard that the axe's sorcerous freezing power was a gift from Tarnies, and had seen Thorin turn attacking orcs into ice sculptures with it. Feely glanced at Killy. The younger dwarf was thinking the same thing. "That kind of weapon is too precious. I doubt Tarnies would give it away easily, and we've already received a lot from him," Feely said quietly. "Teacher Bernal, please let Keely and me learn the basic skills first." Keely nodded vigorously. Bernal beamed. "Good. Your willingness to build a solid foundation pleases me. Let's start with the basics." Feely, rubbing his sore cheek, added tentatively, Teacher Bernal, can we start with skills that don't make us feel pain?" Bernal chuckled and didn't refuse. "Of course, we'll start with preparation stance." He headed to the armory and returned with 3 common longswords and 3 iron-shaped shields. He tossed a sword and a shield to each dwarf. They caught them easily. The weapons felt awkward in their hands. The standard longswords were a few inches longer than their legs, and the medium shields covered nearly half of their bodies. What felt like a normal longsword and shield in human hands were almost like great swords and great shields for dwarves. Bernal didn't draw his sword. He asked, "When you meet an enemy with a shield, what do you do?" Keely answered immediately, "Get to their flank or behind them where the shield can't protect." Feely considered and said, "I'd throw a knife at their eyes, and while they raise the shield, rush in to attack their exposed lower body." "Both are reasonable," Bernal said, "but the preparation stance I want to teach lets you break an enemy's defense head-on." He held his sheathed longsword parallel to the ground. "It's better to see it than to hear me talk. Feely, raise your shield and block my attack." Feely, as if asking why he always had to be first, gritted his teeth and did as told. Bernal told Killy to watch closely, and then suddenly thrust the sword sheath upward, striking the lower edge of Feely's shield from bottom to top. Feely felt the blow surge through the shield, as if struck by a goat. He nearly lost his grip and staggered backward a few steps. If not for a dwarf's impeccable balance, he might have fallen. Bernal had held back his full power, but the technique still pushed Fili off his feet. Bernal was instantly at Fili's side, steadying him. Fili looked at Kili with wide eyes, asking silently what he had seen. Kili frowned. Teacher Bernal hit your shield from below, but there was a moment when something in his weapon changed. It wasn't an ordinary strike. Bernal nodded. That's what a successful battle skill looks like. Kili, your turn. Fili, stand where Kili was and observe. Kili took the shield and swapped places. The result was the same. The shield almost slipped from his hands and he stumbled back, astonished but excited. Fili walked up, his face bright with understanding. I see what Kili meant. At one moment during the attack, every part of Bernal's body moved in perfect coordination and kept that state through the strike. Exactly, Bernal said. You dwarves are sharp, able to grasp the essence of a skill just from seeing it once. Now you've seen the preparation stance, it's your turn to try. Fili, again. Fili copied Bernal's posture. Bernal came over and adjusted him step by step, hands guiding, voice encouraging. Keep the sword parallel, don't sink your center too low. Relax your muscles, don't tense up. Kili, don't just stand there. Come and see where your brother's posture is wrong so you don't make the same mistakes. Day after day, they practiced under Bernal's impatient but careful instruction. Time passed quickly. A month went by in the blur of drills and corrections. When Rogier and Dee finally returned to the Golden Tree lands, they looked travel-weary and brought word from Shabard. They had an old friend with them. They had met him in the swamps of Shabard and brought him back. Riding a white horse, dressed in a gray robe and a pointed wizard's hat, Gandalf rode into their sight. He looked up at the towers of Fort Hate, the walls of Moan City, and Stormvale Castle with a small, pleased smile. My friend Tarns has given me a great surprise, the old wise wizard murmured. Chapter 49. Are you also inviting me to the meeting? When word came that Gandalf had returned with Rogier and Dee, Tarns hurried outside Stormvale Castle to meet them. Rogier and his companions were quick on their heels and soon arrived at the main gate. Tarns stepped forward and embraced Rogier, Dee, and then Gandalf in turn. You've worked hard, Rogier, Dee, Tarns said as he embraced them. Then he smiled and opened his arms toward Gandalf. We haven't seen one another in almost half a year, have we? You must be surprised by how my lands have changed. Gandalf chuckled as he returned the embrace. When they let go, he said kindly, The speed at which you've rebuilt your home is astonishing. It's been only half a year since we parted, and yet your lands look like they were renewed over 50. On my way back, I passed through human realms and already heard bards singing of your territory. Tarns frowned with curiosity. Oh, I've been in Minhiriath the whole time, and my people haven't been to human settlements. Why would human bards sing of my lands? What do they sing? Gandalf cleared his throat, remembered the verses, and declaimed in a ringing theatrical tone. At the ancient western frontier, the hand of plague cast death's dark seal. Floods devoured fields, and sorrow filled the land. But in the southwest stood a lone wizard, his eyes alight with hope. Clad in armor, bearing a treasured blade, he walked steadily, vowing to rebuild from the ruins. He trod on golden land and planted seeds of peace within his heart. His words rang across the waste, and life and hope stirred once more. The distant homeland would no longer be a dream. In that once barren land, the radiance of gold and the song of peace will forever greet each dawn. Dee murmured, Not bad, and a small, pleased smile crossed his face. Humans praising Tarns and his golden tree pleased a believer in the tree. Rogier, who stood beside him, felt Dee's mood and clapped softly. Indeed, it's a fine song. Thank you, Gandalf. Tarns was even more curious now. How did the human bards learn of my affairs? You'll have to thank your dwarf friends, Gandalf said. Those praises and poems were spread by dwarves who traveled from the Blue Mountains. Dwarves? Tarns thought of Thorin and his kin and smiled. It made sense. Gandalf added with a chuckle, In time, you may see humans come to inspect your lands. Wizards rarely stay in one place long, much less establish their own territories. You're only the second wizard I know who has done so you can expect interest. If friends come, I'll lay out good food and wine to welcome them, Tarns replied. Then, noticing Gandalf's choice of words, he asked, The second? Is there another wizard who set up his own domain? Gandalf's smile dimmed briefly. Yes, Saruman the White. He came to Middle-earth with me and set a tower in Isengard. Tarns noticed the brief tightness in Gandalf's face and could tell the two had a strained history. He didn't press the matter. Instead, his eye caught the pair of slender, golden, ceremonial straight swords at Gandalf's waist. To change the subject, he teased, "More than the dwarves' songs, I'm curious about the nickname you used for me in Rivendell, Swordgiver. Why that name?" Gandalf laughed lightly. When I was in Rivendell talking with Elrond, he noticed the ceremonial straight sword you gave me and asked what to call you. I drew a blank for a moment, and, well, that's how it stuck." Tarns waved it off and asked, "Have those swords been of use?" Gandalf let his hand rest on a golden hilt and smiled. "Very much so. If not for that blade, it might have taken me a few more days to find my way back to you." Tarns' smile faded as the gravity of Gandalf's tone sank in. "Is this about your investigation in the north? What has changed?" Gandalf's expression turned serious. He glanced at Rogier and Dee, who waited quietly, then said, "This isn't the place for a long talk. Take us somewhere more private. There's much I must tell you." Inside the City Lord's hall, with a goblet of deep reddish-purple wine before him, Tarnis had obliged Gandalf's earlier wish. Gandalf listened as Rogier finished his briefing on Shabard. Rogier stood by the round conference table and relayed what he had seen. Like the abandoned Takrandale, Shabard has broad stretches of ruined buildings and a long great bridge spanning the Greywater River. But this bridge is older and broken in many places. Much of it has collapsed and is unusable, much like the bridges outside Raya Lucarian Academy. He sat down when he'd finished. Dee rose and added, "Unlike Takrandale, which can garrison Misbegotten, Shabard is swampy. The semi-ruined bridge makes the surrounding area dangerous and unstable. Who knows when the rest will fall? Until the river port is rebuilt, it can't be used for troops or habitation. The city is 3 or 4 times larger than Takrandale. Rebuilding it now would drain manpower and resources we can't spare." Rogier, seated, smiled faintly. "Perhaps when the Golden Tree's protection reaches Shabard, Tarns, you could relocate the Mage Academy from Liyue there. That would save much in human resources and coin." Tarnis nodded and looked at Gandalf, remembering that the matter of rebuilding Shabard had been discussed with Elrond. Gandalf noticed and sipped his wine. "Tarns, rebuilding Shabard need not be rushed. I believe Lord Elrond has already conveyed our wishes." Tarns agreed. "Yes, as Rogier said, I'll not send anyone there until the Golden Tree's range reaches it." He then added, "Gandalf, I have something to tell you as well." Gandalf asked, "What is it?" "It concerns Takrandale," Tarns said. Gandalf's brow tightened. "Takrandale? I thought you'd mentioned it was occupied by misbegotten forces. Has something gone wrong?" "It happened earlier," Tarns said. "At some point, Takrandale was taken by a band of orcs. They abducted humans from across Middle-earth and enslaved them to repair the Limgrave Great Bridge." Gandalf's blue eyes widened. He stood abruptly, the shock visible in his face. "Orcs repairing the Limgrave Great Bridge?" He reached for his pipe and tobacco out of instinct, and then, remembering they were in the City Lord's hall, set them back down. His face became grave. "If I didn't know you, I'd think you were telling me a jest." Rogier, curious, asked, "Is it so serious? Orcs do sometimes seize strongholds." "This is not at all ordinary," Gandalf said, shaking his head and finally picking up his pipe. "If it were humans, or even dwarves, occupying a place to repair and hold it, that would make sense. Orcs are more given to destruction than careful rebuilding. They wouldn't set about repairing a major bridge unless they were under the command of a particular leader." Tarnans remembered something and spoke. "When the Golden Tree's misbegotten defeated the orcs at Takrandale, they captured the leader alive. During questioning, I asked who ordered them to repair the Limgrave Great Bridge. That orc said, 'Our master has returned. Darkness will cover Middle-earth again,' and then he killed himself." Gandalf's pipe slipped from his fingers and clattered to the floor. He ignored the fall and stared at Tarns with tense eyes. "Are you certain? Did you not mishear? Did he really say that?" Tarnas raised his right hand and pointed toward the Golden Tree. "I swear by the Golden Tree, Gandalf. I did not mishear." Gandalf's face grew complex. He bent to pick up his pipe and said softly, "No wonder I met organized orc groups on my way to the Lonely Mountain. They've been harassing villages and merchants in a way that suggests they obey orders. Darkness. It may not be certain yet, but we cannot dismiss the possibility, he muttered. Then he lifted his head, the wise features beneath his pointed hat set in determination. What you told me is very useful. It may be time to convoke the White Council again. Would you come with me to Rivendell and join the council, Tarns? If my hunch is right, confronting whatever is stirring will need your strength. Tarns hesitated. How long will the journey take? Gandalf estimated. To be safe, about 5 months, assuming we meet no mishaps. Rivendell is far, and with Shabard's waterway impassable, that's about the quickest route. Tarn's expression soured. It feels like everyone wants me at their meetings. I'm afraid I can't accept. You're not the first to ask. I'd go gladly, but I've already promised someone else. Whom would you refuse a wizard for? Gandalf asked. The Dwarves of the Blue Mountains, Tarn said. Their king, Thorin Oakenshield, has summoned me. Gandalf's eyes lit with surprise. Thorin? I intended to visit the Blue Mountains on this trip. He sat back, thoughts aligning. Wait, so Thorin is convening the Ered Luin meeting? He's preparing to claim the Lonely Mountain? Tarnus, surprised that Gandalf had put the pieces together, asked, You were planning to find Thorin and persuade him to reclaim the Lonely Mountain? Gandalf nodded. Yes. While the evil there slumbers and the dragon is still in its hoard, this is the best moment for the dwarves to attempt a reclaiming. Tarnas smiled wryly at the familiar pull of duty and politics around him. Thank you to all the readers for your monthly votes, recommendation tickets, and rewards. Chapter 50. Everyone is busy. But I didn't expect Thorin to invite you to the Dwarven Council, Tarns. That saved me the trouble of persuading him to reclaim the Lonely Mountain, Gandalf said with a chuckle. Tarnas looked curious. I'm actually wondering why you're so keen on getting Thorin to reclaim the Lonely Mountain. Gandalf's face grew serious. All the signs point to a stirring of darkness, Tarns. The dragon in the Lonely Mountain serves no master now, but if it sides with the Dark Host, the damage to Middle-earth would be catastrophic. Imagine the army of Gondor, holding the line against the orcs in the southeast, suddenly seeing a great dragon overhead, belching flame. The front they've held so hard for years could collapse in a day. And the Lonely Mountain's position is vital, he continued. If the dark forces take it, they could use it as a stronghold to march south from the north. The dwarves of the Iron Hills alone couldn't hold the northern passes or resist an Angmarian push. The whole north could be plunged into war. Tarn stroked his chin. So you want the dwarves to reclaim Erebor as the first line of defense against enemies from the north? Gandalf nodded, relieved to be understood. Exactly. And to hear that Thorin intends to do that, well, it's one of the few pieces of good news I've had lately. Tarn warned him, though, don't get too pleased yet. Even if Thorin wants to move, he needs the consent of the 7 dwarven houses to raise their armies. Otherwise, he can only go alone, though I promised him I would help. Gandalf acknowledged the point, then, with a confident air, produced from his gray robe an old map and a small iron key. Tarn's brow rose. What are those? Gandalf smiled faintly. Thorin told you the Lonely Mountain is sealed, did he not? Tarnas nodded. Gandalf pinched the key between his fingers and held it up. These are what open it. I once met Thrain, Thorin's father. He gave me the key and the map to the secret door and asked me to give them to Thorin when the time was right. Tarnas was not surprised that a great fortress might have a secret entrance. Fortresses and castles everywhere had hidden ways. Still, he asked, even so, those 2 items won't be enough to persuade the 7 houses to back Thorin. Where does your confidence come from? Gandalf's smile returned. You're right, they may refuse Thorin, but they cannot refuse their own king's treasure inside the Lonely Mountain, the Arkenstone, the heart of the mountain. The 7 dwarven houses have sworn fealty to that jewel. If Thorin can slip inside while the dragon sleeps, take the Arkenstone out, they will rally to him. He will then be able to gather an army, kill the dragon, and reclaim the mountain. Tarnis blinked. So the first trip into the mountain isn't about killing the dragon. He just needs to get in through the secret door, find the Arkenstone, carry it out, and return to the Blue Mountains? Gandalf's eyebrow lifted. Wait, did you just say you would help Thorin? You mean you're preparing to fight that dragon? Tarnis sounded startled at being misunderstood. Yes, what else? The first time I met you, I said a dragon there should be slain. Gandalf's mouth opened in astonishment. He lowered the map and key into his sleeve and said, I thought that was a polite boast. I don't think anyone truly wants to face a massive, fire-breathing dragon alone. Tarns shrugged. Perhaps, but I meant it. I've already agreed with Thorin to attend the Dwarven Council, and because of scheduling, I can't make the White Council you mentioned. Gandalf's face showed genuine regret. I had hoped to use the White Council to introduce you to Lady Galadriel and Saruman the White. Galadriel is wise and beautiful. Saruman, though proud, is a man of great learning. Tarns proposed a compromise. Then why not try this? You and I go to the Blue Mountains first. After the meeting there ends, I'll come with you to Rivendell. How does that sound? Gandalf shook his head. I still have business to attend to before the White Council. I can't go to the Seven Kingdoms meeting with you. If you hadn't told me of Thorin's plan, I might have rushed to the Blue Mountains tonight. Tarns sighed and accepted it. Very well. Changing the subject, Gandalf's expression softened. If you're not pressed, would you show me around your lands? Tarns brightened. Of course. Try not to be too surprised. He then turned to Rogier and Dee. You two should rest here for a few days. No long scouting missions for now. Rogier laughed. I can't help it, Tarns. If you have no tasks for me, I'd like to go see the Blue Mountains. Tarns asked, why the sudden urge? Before Rogier could answer, Dee, ever indifferent, said to him, he's been complaining about nothing but swamps and barren land along the road. He wants to see something beautiful. I've heard him whine so often, my ears are nearly calloused. Rogier coughed awkwardly. Well, Darian's right. I'm curious about this world and want to travel when I'm free. Tarns paused, then apologetically told Rogier, I was thoughtless to overlook your feelings. Rogier waved it off. Not your fault. Dee never complains. It's simply my curiosity. Gandalf glanced at Tarns's apologetic face and smiled. It's natural. A man like Tarns wouldn't want to prevent a friend from seeing the world. He changed tack. But beauty can hide danger. If you want lovely sights, travel to Rivendell. Lord Elrond knows you and looks forward to visitors from the Golden Tree. Its scenery won't disappoint. Tarns's eyes lit up. That would be wonderful. Rogier? Rogier considered a moment. Rivendell? That sounds excellent. Tarns glanced at Dee. Would you like to come and lift your spirits? Dee stood, bowed slightly, and with a small spark in his eyes said, Thank you for your kindness, Lord Tarnas, but I am not a weak wizard who needs holidays. Command me, and I will do my utmost. Tarns smiled inwardly. He thought for a moment, and then proposed. Rogier, Dee, after you rest here, go north. Bring some books written by dwarves and elves, and some everyday goods from the lands between to Hobbiton in the Shire. Deliver them to a hobbit named Bilbo Baggins. On my behalf, ask how he fares and say, Thank you, Bilbo, for the food that saved Tarns from hunger on his journey. Gandalf chuckled. Hobbiton is a peaceful, secluded place. Warm chimneys, busy farms, quiet lakes, and green terraces. If one wished to settle somewhere, Hobbiton would be a fine choice. Tarns nodded, remembering the hospitable hobbit he'd met. Even a few days there made an impression. The hobbits love life, Dee agreed at once. If Bilbo helped Lord Tarns, I will make sure the items please him. Rogier smiled. It sounds perfect for afternoon tea. Sitting in a wicker chair, reading slowly. If Bilbo will host me, I might linger a few days. Tarns returned the smile. He will, Rogier. A week after Rogier and Dee departed, Thorin returned to the Golden Tree's lands. Gandalf had not yet left, and upon hearing Thorin's arrival, he planned to speak with him about the mountain. But when Tarns saw Thorin enter the City Lord Hall with a downcast look, he sensed trouble. Gandalf, who had long since learned to read faces, did not speak before he understood what had befallen Thorin. He exchanged a look with Tarns, who was closer friends with the dwarf and better placed to ask. Thorin, Tarns said, have you come across difficulties? You look troubled. How did the Dwarven Council go? Thorin downed the ale the maid set before him and slammed the mug onto the table. His usually restrained dwarf temper broke. The council? Those cowards didn't even come. They refused. Even though the dragon has slept for nearly 60 years, the Seven Kingdoms would rather sit and watch the treasures of the Lonely Mountain be coveted than agree to my plan to reclaim it. Tarnis signaled the maid for more ale and said gently, Another mug. Calm yourself, Thorin. Thorin poured out the anger that had built over his journey in bitter words. He leaned back, drank another mug, and closed his eyes. The ore and labor to forge black arrows are gone. The forces outside the gates are gone. They told me I'm not the king of Durin and have no right to inherit the throne. Only if I produce the Arkenstone will they acknowledge my claim. Tarns and Gandalf exchanged looks. Tarn placed a hand on Thorin's shoulder. You still have me, Thorin. I promised, and I have not forgotten. Whether you gain the 7 houses or not, I will help you. Thorin's hard, angry expression softened. He looked at Tarns with something like gratitude. You are the most trustworthy man I have met, Tarns. Tarns smiled, then added mysteriously, and you are not without a way to obtain the Arkenstone. Thorin's confusion showed immediately. What do you mean? The Arkenstone lies deep within the mountain, buried beneath a mountain of gold, under the feet of a fire-breathing dragon. How can I possibly retrieve it? Gandalf smiled. We must slip in through the secret door and have a nimble thief steal the Arkenstone. Secret door, Thorin barked. Thief? Tarns echoed. His surprise at the suggestion of a thief showed from a different angle. Thorin frowned at Gandalf and searched the stranger's face as if trying to place him. Gandalf bowed slightly and answered with quiet pride. I suppose I should introduce myself. I am Gandalf, Gandalf the Grey. PS1. In the original book, the Arkenstone is simply a beautiful gem without any inherent loyalty to power. The film version gave the Arkenstone a political significance. I find that change more reasonable, so I used the movie's version here. PS2. I bought tickets for the Battle of Rohan this Sunday night. For readers who've seen the premiere, how is this Lord of the Rings animated film? Chapter 51. The Last of the 7 Rings of the Dwarves. Thorin looked at Gandalf and gave a slight nod. I know your name. Tarns has spoken of you. What do you mean by a side door? Gandalf did not take out the map and key at once. Instead, he said quietly, I once met your father, Thrain. He entrusted me with 2 things that can help you find and enter Erebor's side door. The moment Gandalf mentioned Thrain, Thorin sprang to his feet, not caring about maps or keys. My father? Where did you see him? Everyone says he's dead, but I don't believe it. He's simply missing. Gandalf's lips tightened. I am sorry, Thorin. When I met Thrain, the news of his disappearance had not yet spread. After he gave me the items, I do not know where he went. The last time I saw him was south of the Moria Gate, near the Black Lands. He was accompanied by a few loyal dwarven warriors. Thorin sank back into his seat, despair flickering across his face. That's all I've heard before. It doesn't help me find him. Tarnas cleared his throat. Thorin, the fact your father entrusted Gandalf with such important items shows he, like you, still hopes to reclaim Erebor. Gandalf added softly, Yes. Everything about Thrain has become rumor and shadow. Don't let despair take you. He fixed Thorin with a steady look. And the items? They're a map of Erebor and a key. Gather your people and wait for word. When the time is right, I will tell you when to go. Thorin frowned. Why wait? Why not now? Gandalf's eyes narrowed. Because the time of prophecy has not yet come. If the birds of old return to Erebor, the reign of the dragon will end. You must wait. I also need time to find a burglar. This is a wizard's request, Thorin Oakenshield. Thorin fell silent. Tarns, restless, asked, Gandalf, why do you keep saying burglar? Gandalf smiled. Yes, a burglar. I want someone nimble to find the secret door and, if possible, steal the Arkenstone from the dragon. No one wants to face a great dragon in open battle. A skillful thief who can take what we need without a slaughter is far better. Tarn stroked his chin. If it's simply stealing, I can do it. Take something without disturbing the enemy. If I'm discovered, I can run. Gandalf looked him over, surprised. You have that sort of skill? You don't strike me as the thievish sort. Thorin shared the reaction. Tarns grinned. Oh, and what sort of person do you think I am? A warrior who can face 1,000 and a generous companion, Thorin said without hesitation. Gandalf considered. I pictured you as a steady, upright knight. Theft does not seem to suit you. Tarns, a little embarrassed by the backhanded compliments, quickly added, I'm no professional burglar, only that I happen to have something that helps. He produced a dark, glossy, rolled cloth from his cloak, the concealing veil, prize from a black knife assassin. Thorin stared, but Gandalf's face changed. He felt a faint, unfamiliar magic. What does it do? He asked. Tarnes rose, squatted down, and explained, It's called the concealing veil. As long as I crouch and wrap it around me, I vanish." He spoke, and before Thorin and Gandalf, the man simply disappeared. Thorin's eyes widened. Gandalf cried out in admiration. A cunning sort of invisibility. He might as well have stepped out of the world. "Tarnas, where are you?" Tarnas's voice came from behind them. "Here." He stood, dispelled the effect, and held the veil up with a grin. "With this, the Arkenstone should be easy to take, yes?" Thorin nodded. Tarnas's confidence pleased him. Gandalf, however, wore a troubled look. Tarnas asked, "Is something wrong, Gandalf? Is the veil flawed?" Gandalf glanced at him more than once. "The veil is fine. The problem is Erebor itself." Thorin's brow furrowed. "What's wrong with Erebor? There's no treasure that can pierce Tarnas's invisibility. If the dragon sleeps, he wouldn't even notice someone slipping in." Gandalf shook his head. "Not that. You are a dwarf, Thorin. The side door your father knew will be sized for dwarves. It won't be as tall or broad as the main gate." Tarnas's face fell. "You mean I might not fit, even crouched?" "I don't know," Gandalf admitted. "You can try, but to avoid wasting time, we should have a burglar of dwarven size." Thorin tried to think of anyone suitable among his warriors and came up empty. Gandalf, reading his concern, chuckled. "You need not worry. I will recommend a trustworthy burglar to accompany your expedition." Thorin had no choice but to nod. Gandalf glanced at Thorin's hands on the table with a new intensity, his aged face growing serious. Thorin noticed and spread his hands. "What? You were staring like you were searching for something." Gandalf hesitated over his pipe, then, remembering he was indoors, set it aside unlit. Tarnas, ever observant, said, "If you want to smoke, go ahead. I don't think there are many rules here." Gandalf brightened, producing a tobacco pouch as if by magic, and packed his pipe. The scent made Tarns smile. "That smells like Shire tobacco," he said. Gandalf lit the pipe and drew a slow, satisfied puff. Then, tapping the bowl, he said, "I was looking for a ring on your palm." "A ring?" Thorin's expression changed at once. He understood. Gandalf nodded. "One of the 7 rings given to the dwarven lords in the old days. Where is it now?" Thorin straightened. "My grandfather, before the Battle of Moria, gave it to my father." Gandalf exhaled. The smoke wreathed around him. "So Thrain disappeared with that dwarven ring." Thorin nodded grimly. Gandalf fell silent for a long moment, then stood, shook out his cloak, and said with urgency, "I erred. When I last saw Thrain, I should have urged him to safeguard that ring. Of the 7 dwarven rings, 4 were devoured by dragons, and 2 taken before the war with Mordor. Now the last has vanished with its owner. This is serious. I must go back to where I last saw him and search." Thorin rose in an instant. "Let me go with you. He's my father. I must know if he lives or is dead." Gandalf's pale blue eyes softened. "I understand, Thorin, but your duty now is to gather those willing to follow you to the Lonely Mountain. I will search for your father. Trust a wizard's word. When I find him, I will send for you. When the right burglar is chosen, I will mark his door with a rune like an F. You will know whom to trust. When you have enough people, bring them to Hobbiton." Thorin clenched his fists, then let them fall. "Very well. I will trust you this once." Gandalf took only a small bundle of provisions, and, after a quick farewell, mounted the white horse he had ridden in on and set off. Tarns watched him go until the traveler was a speck on the road, then looked at Thorin. "You lot are always in such a hurry. You just arrived, and Gandalf's already gone." Thorin's gaze remained fixed on the path Gandalf had taken. His face, handsome and hard, softened with longing or grief. Tarns's words did not reach him until a hand on his shoulder. "You were too sudden coming here," Tarny said gently. "I didn't have time to tell Feely and Keely. Want to see them? They're different now." Thorin blinked back to the present and smiled. "Yes, I saw their letters saying you gave them a fine teacher. I brought their tuition this time. Should I hand it to you now?" Tarns waved him off. "Give it to their teacher. He's a compatriot of mine and strong enough to train them. He's taken a real liking to them. They grit their teeth through terrifying drills." Thorin's pride and worry wavered into something softer. "Can they bear it? If anyone can heal and harden them, it's the Golden Tree's place," Tarna said, laughing. "There's nowhere else like it for restoring the body and curing hidden wounds." Thorin remembered how Tarnas had eased his comrades' hurts in mere motions and relaxed. Elsewhere, Rogier and Dee, who had set out earlier, neared the Shire. Dee pointed toward the riverbank where faint human voices drifted and asked, "Is that Hobbiton?" Rogier checked the map tucked in his cloak and nodded. "If we haven't strayed, that's Hobbiton." Dee pulled the pack horse's reins and scolded, half amused, half impatient. "When will you stop repeating everything? Yes is yes, no is no." Rogier folded the map away and smiled. "Because I'm never quite sure." Chapter 52. Bilbo's Shock. Sunlight slanted across the wide lawn, golden rays dancing on the tips of emerald grass like countless tiny diamonds. A gentle breeze made the blades whisper, and the whole scene felt as cozy and bustling as Hobbiton itself. A winding path of ancient bluestone led Rogier and Darien through the green to the edge of a tidy vegetable garden. Tomatoes gleamed red, pumpkins sat fat and yellow, and eggplants shone a deep purple. Everything seemed richer under the sun. Bees flitted among the flowers and butterflies drifted by. In one corner, a cluster of small children chased one another, their laughter bright and high, their shadows stretching and shrinking as they ran. The children were the first to notice the newcomers. One by one, they ducked behind trellises and fences, then peered out again with curious, wary eyes. "I think they're frightened of your armor, Darien," Rogier said with a grin. Darien, uncharacteristically quiet, touched the full metal faceplate of his armor and looked down at his breastplate before answering. "Perhaps you're right." Rogier blinked. "You're not angry this time?" "Angry? About what? This is Tarns's friend's hometown. If I scare the children, it might upset him." Darien's tone was puzzled. Rogier's expression turned into a smug, "I knew it" smile. Without another word, Darien took off his helmet. His face was handsome but pale. Evidently he had little sun, and he tried to force a friendly smile. The children drew back even further, and Darien's smile froze. Rogier chuckled. "You still need practice smiling without terrifying the neighborhood. Do you know what you looked like just now?" Darien's face tightened. "Like what?" "Like a deathborn who'd crawled out of a coffin trying to learn how to smile." Darien bristled, about to protest that he was nothing like a deathborn, but when the children peered out again, his tone softened. "Don't compare me to those foul deathborn, Rogier." All right, Rogier said, lifting a hand in apology. He knelt, took off his pointed hat, and opened a small pouch of dried fruit. "Hello there. We're looking for Mr. Bilbo Baggins. Can you tell us where he lives? And here, some snacks for you, whether you help or not." The children exchanged glances and then scattered, running off instead of answering. Rogier looked after them, momentarily stunned. Darien gave a small laugh. "Is that your approachable manner? You scared them off more than I did." Rogier shrugged, replaced his hat, and said, "Maybe they're just shy around strangers." Darien tugged on the pack horse's reins and shot Rogier a look, saying nothing as they moved on. The path widened to a pond where light skittered across ripples and ducks drifted serenely, punctuating the pond with contented quacks that made nearby anglers wave them away. Across the water, the market hummed, vendors selling root vegetables and dyed cloth, friends clustered at tables tasting pre-lunch treats. Every face wore a smile. Hobbits were short, shorter even than the dwarves Rogier and Darien had met, and unlike dwarves, they dressed carefully and neatly. They were barefoot, though, large, rough, hairy soles, and that, along with the visitors' height, made Rogier and Darien tower like small, peculiar giants. The market folk took note, whispering and nudging one another. Some eyeing the loaded pack horse mentally tallied what they might pay for strange goods and what they could charge their neighbors for them. Uncomfortable with all the attention, Darien replaced his helmet, the false gold face smooth and unreadable. Rogier remembered Tarns's description. Bilbo's house was a hobbit hole in a small hill, with a row of benches at the entrance, an old mailbox, a grass-covered roof, flowers by the door, and a round brown wooden door. He peered under his hat, but Hobbiton was full of such homes. Every one matched the description. Rogier couldn't tell which was Bilbo's. Darien stopped. "You still don't know which house? Everyone's staring. I feel like a curiosity." "Maybe Tarns didn't realize all the houses look the same," Rogier admitted. "Then ask the people behind the fence," Darien suggested. "They should know." He was about to when a flurry of voices and a familiar complaining tone reached them. "I don't mind playing, but tell me where you're taking me. I'll tell your parents and demand blueberry cheese and strawberry biscuits." A group of children pushed a small, protest-filled figure forward. Bilbo Baggins in a yellow plaid shirt, baggy white breeches, and a red waistcoat, pipe in hand, appeared, squawking in mock indignation. When he saw Roger and Darien, his surprise was immediate. "Wait, don't bring me to those tall fellows. I don't know them," he protested, waving his pipe. The children raced ahead, then skidded to a stop in front of the visitors, eyes wide and hopeful. Roger stood and offered the snacks with a warm smile. The children scattered to join the market, leaving Roger, Darien, and Bilbo alone. Bilbo smoothed his clothes, cleared his throat, and peered up. "If you're looking for a hobbit, I'm Bilbo Baggins. What do you want? And I won't be buying anything right now." Roger raised a hand in a small salute. "May I ask if you are Mr. Bilbo Baggins?" At that, curiosity outweighed his desire to flee. Bilbo's expression quivered between astonishment and confusion. Before Roger could speak, with a soft thud, Darien dropped to one knee and announced loudly, "To thank my King Tarnans, His Majesty sent me to visit Mr. Bilbo Baggins in the Shire. All these gifts behind me are from Tarnas, as a token of gratitude to his friend Bilbo Baggins." The sudden proclamation caused a stir. Whispers rippled through the gathered hobbits. When did Bilbo save a king? Half a year ago, someone fell on Bilbo's roof. A king? Bilbo's disbelief was audible. Tarnas is a king? Isn't he a wizard? Roger rubbed his forehead and then, smiling wanly, said to Bilbo, "There's a lot to explain, but it's best if we go to your house. Otherwise, we may never be allowed to leave." Bilbo peered at the growing crowd of onlookers and hurriedly agreed. "You're right, Mr. Pointy Hat. Let your, Mr. Armor get up. My home's not far." Word of the supposed royal thanks and a human knight kneeling at Bilbo's feet spread faster than they could walk. It grew in the telling. Soon Bilbo imagined he'd be marrying a human princess, the two men as witnesses, and the pack horse's load a dowry. Once inside, Bilbo bolted the round door and guided them to a small room. "You can put the things there," he said, pointing to a chamber on the right. Roger and Darien set down the packages and bundles. Bilbo bustled about, soon returning with a teapot steaming with boiled milk, a plate of cookies, and a wedge of cheese. He tied a napkin about his throat with a flourish and beamed. "Now we can have a proper chat about Tarns and about you." He glanced at Darien, then added, "You don't have to be so formal with me. Not entirely. Just, be polite. Call me Bilbo." Darien had already removed his helmet again and inclined his head briskly. "All right, Mr. Bilbo." "Well, you don't need the mister, but whatever makes you happy," Bilbo said, and popped a milk-scented cookie into his mouth. Roger and Darien sampled the offerings. For Roger, the cookies were tiny. For Bilbo, they were perfectly sized. Darien tasted everything with solemn interest, as if composing a report on Hobbit fare. Bilbo almost wondered whether he should ask for a formal critique. "Let me introduce myself," Roger said. "I'm Roger, and this is Darien. Call him D if you like." Bilbo smiled. "Pleased to meet you both. How's Tarns been? He told me he meant to rebuild his homeland. I've been wondering if he managed it." Roger nodded. "We've had some success. At least we have shelter now." "That's good," Bilbo said, brightening. "I'm looking forward to his next visit. He told such marvelous stories, and I took notes. But some parts are fuzzy. I meant to ask him more." Darien reached into his armor and produced a well-kept envelope. "Tarns has been busy, but he wrote to you. He entrusted me to bring it." Bilbo's eyes widened as he took the letter. Roger added, "May I see the stories you wrote about Tarns? I traveled with him briefly. Maybe I can help fill in some details." Bilbo's face lit up in a grin. "Aha, would you? That would be perfect." Chapter 53. Time flies. Because Roger and Dee had different plans, Roger, who wanted to sightsee, asked to stay an extra week, and the hospitable hobbit readily agreed. Dee, after delivering all of Tarns's gifts and letters to Bilbo, spent one night and left early the next morning. Before he rode off, he politely asked Bilbo if he would like to come with him to Tarns's territory to see the Golden Tree and join the Golden Order. "No, I think Bag End suits me better," Bilbo said. "Please thank Tarns for me. He gave me far too many things. Besides the delicious-looking dried goods and the books I haven't read, there were even some luxuries fit for human nobles." Bilbo wasn't sure what the Golden Order was, and hearing Dee's fervent tone and solemn demeanor, he tactfully declined. Those luxuries had actually been prepared privately by Dee, who who had guessed Bilbo would prefer books and food to finery. Dee did not take offense. He nodded. "That is a pity. I will tell Tarns, your majesty." "Be careful on the road, Darien," Rogier said with a smile. Dee glanced at Rogier, slipped on his helmet, and replied, "You're the one who needs to be careful, Rogier. I don't want to hear about you getting into trouble again. Don't let those Deathblight-like fellows trick you this time." Rogier gave a hand-to-chest salute as Dee mounted the pack horse, now light of gifts, and rode away from Hobbiton. Bilbo waited until Dee was a distant speck before turning to Rogier. "Does your friend always speak so formally? Honestly, his compliments made me a bit embarrassed." Rogier's eyes twinkled. "Darien only speaks that way to those he respects. He's not like that with me, maybe because we're friends." Bilbo asked curiously. "Then what about people he dislikes?" Rogier considered and said, "Either he endures and ignores them, or he draws his sword and cuts them down." Bilbo widened his eyes and feigned shock. "Oh, then I'd better be careful not to become someone he dislikes." Rogier laughed. "It's hard for you to become someone he dislikes. After all, you are a lively, living person." Bilbo tilted his head, puzzled. "What does that mean? Does he dislike lively dead people?" "Or maybe they aren't people at all," Rogier said mysteriously. Bilbo admitted he didn't really understand, but didn't dwell on it. "Let's go home and talk over some food," he said with a smile. "What you added about Tarns yesterday was fascinating." Rogier, following Bilbo's small figure, paused. "Wait, didn't we just have breakfast?" Bilbo produced his pipe and nodded as if it were obvious. "Yes, but we still have afternoon tea, chat pastries, and pre-lunch snacks." Rogier touched his stomach unconsciously. He felt he might need more exercise while staying in Hobbiton. How did hobbits eat so much without getting fat? Curious, he decided to use the extra week to observe their habits. Meanwhile, in the Golden Tree territory, Thorin had visited Fili and Kili and then returned to the Blue Mountains. The tuition Thorin brought exceeded Tarns' expectations. A silver-white battle-skill axe in dwarven style forged from a rare metal Tarns had never seen. Thorin called it mithril. An equivalent volume of mithril was worth 10 times its weight in gold. When Thorin produced the axe, Fili and Kili's eyes widened in disbelief. Tarnes and Bernal learned from the dwarf brothers that mithril was no longer mined because its source was occupied by a Balrog called Durin's Bane. All existing mithril was ancient and treasured, but Thorin valued the friendship with Tarnes far more than the mithril axe. After seeing how much Fili and Kili had learned, his conviction only strengthened. Under Bernal's almost fanatical instruction and the two dwarves' stubborn persistence, the princelings had mastered many basic battle skills that complemented the beast prayers they had learned from Tarns. Finding Bernal had been the right choice. Battle-hardened warriors aren't always adept at weaving prayers into combat. If Thorin had had fewer obligations, he would have shamelessly asked Tarns to let Bernal teach him too. Ultimately, Thorin left the mithril battle skill axe with Bernal as payment. Bernal's surprise was clear the moment he held it. "It's harder than steel, yet not very heavy," he said after swinging it a few times. Thorin breathed a quiet sigh of relief, seeing Bernal pleased. In Thorin's view, the training of Fili and Kili far outweighed a single mithril axe. If they returned home and taught other dwarves, he believed not even the dragon of the Lonely Mountain, or Durin's Bane in Moria, would be unbeatable. Perhaps mithril could be mined again. Tarns and Bernal, however, did not regard the axe as particularly extraordinary. In the lands between, they'd seen many divine weapons. To them, the mithril axe's rarity didn't make it awe-inspiring. That said, they recognized its value. If the axe had been given to someone like Kenneth Haight of Haight Fortress, that old-fashioned golden noble would have treasured it as a prized relic, waiting to award it to a soldier who achieved great merit. Seasons slipped by. Summer's heat cooled to autumn, and months passed quickly. Rogier traveled from Hobbiton to Bree, and then to Rivendell, earning a reputation as the mysterious, demonic swordsman, before returning contentedly to the Golden Tree territory. No major incidents occurred in that time. The Golden Tree continued to grow, its protective field expanded, and life within the territory ran smoothly. Tarns occasionally summoned residents of the lands between, the Misbegotten, Godric's royal army, and the Storm King's former soldiers and knights, to address the problem of a large territory with too few people. At the initiative of the young Storm King Nephili Lux, those exiled soldiers and banished knights were allowed to reclaim their original names, Storm Soldiers and Storm Knights. Their legion was naturally renamed the Storm Legion. The people of the Golden Tree territory would no longer call them by their old exile titles. The summoned misbegotten were settled in Takrandale, now their main living area. After months of reconstruction, the Lion Hybrid reported that the Great Bridge could be used again, but the misbegotten had no intact ships to sail it, and their unfamiliar appearance risked being mistaken for orcs. So they continued repairing the remaining parts of Limgrave Great Bridge. Tarns did not consider the lack of ships insurmountable, but Shabard remained unrepaired, and without it, the sea route from Takrandale through Shabard to Rivendell could not be used. Kenneth Haight proposed that, once the misbegotten repaired the abandoned ships at the Great Bridge, they could sail south, pass Androst, and enter Dol Amroth in Gondor, opening a sea route to Gondor. Tarns rejected this outright, and Nephili Luke and Edgar of Moen City agreed. Their reasons were consistent. The misbegotten had no experience with long-distance sea voyages. Edgar, whose home Moen City lay near the sea, had some knowledge of navigation and stressed how risky opening any new sea route could be. At best, you might arrive at an unfamiliar but safe port. At worst, you could be lost at sea. He pointed out that the misbegotten had once been cargo or slaves on ships, confined in the hold and never exposed to the sea itself. They had no experience actually sailing. Although Edgar's blunt phrasing drew uncomfortable looks, Kenneth Haight had to admit the point. Tarns decided, once Shabard is rebuilt, I will go to Rivendell and ask Elrond for aid. Perhaps among those long-lived elves there are captains skilled in navigation. I will tell him everything. I'm sure Elrond will be pleased to hear of a new sea route. Nephili Lux, Kenneth Haight, and Edgar agreed, so Tarns wrote a letter and sent it with the territory's winged hybrids to the Lion Hybrid at Takrandale. The Lion Hybrid answered in full agreement, and in his reply, he admitted relief. Takrandale still needed repairs. While basic living facilities had been restored, the city walls were only temporarily filled with rubble and wooden stakes. Another large-scale orc attack would only slow the enemy, not stop them. The Lion Hybrid also reported that small groups of orcs, 30 or 40 at a time, had been appearing near Takrandale. Winged hybrids on Sky Patrol, together with scale-skinned hybrids on the ground, had intercepted and driven off these groups, but orcs kept reappearing every couple of weeks. Lately, the frequency had increased. The Lion Hybrid suspected something larger might be stirring in an unknown corner of Middle-earth. Reading that, Tarns thought of Gandalf's warnings about lurking, restless things. He wondered if Gandalf had found any clue about Thorin's father. The old wizard had been silent for months, and Tarns worried he might have disappeared as well. Thorin, by contrast, had been diligent in keeping in touch. He wrote every fortnight, asking after Fili and Kili and updating Tarns on preparations for an expedition to the Lonely Mountain. I have announced my plan to the dwarves I trust, he wrote. Dwalin was the first to answer, then Gloin, and Dwalin's brother Balin has agreed to join. That is all for now. Honestly, I am disheartened. It seems not all dwarves wish to return to the Lonely Mountain. My kin are prosperous in the Blue Mountains. That is their new home. Am I truly worthy of risking Dwalin's and the others' lives on an expedition where death may come at any moment? My friend, guardian of the Golden Tree, mighty wizard, please tell me the answer. As Tarns read Thorin's conflicted words and considered his reply, Nephili Lux entered. Many human caravans have arrived outside the territory, Tarnas, she said. Chapter 54, A Letter from Gandalf. When Tarns arrived near Haight Fort, he could hear a clamor of voices before he even saw Kenneth Haight. He exchanged a look with Nephili Lu and followed the sound. Guests who have traveled far, please be patient. The great Lord of the Golden Tree, Tarns, your majesty, will be here shortly. Kenneth's theatrical voice carried across the courtyard. The Kingrick Royal Army, led by their knight captain, stood in a straight line, showing the weapons in their hands. Tarnas, still wearing his white wolf war ghost armor, stepped forward. He glanced briefly at the crowd and then at Kenneth Haight. You've done well, Kenneth. What's the situation? Why are there two groups of people? In front of Kenneth, a caravan group stood in decent clothes, even lavish attire. They were human, with carriages and armed escorts. Seeing the fully armored soldiers of the royal army, their escorts kept their heads down. A short distance away, another group of ragged people had gathered. Old, weak, ill, and disabled among them, like whole families seeking refuge. Their eyes were watchful and anxious. The stronger men stood at the front, shielding the women, children, and elderly behind them. Most of the noise Tarns and Nephili had heard came from this second group. Kenneth turned at Tarnas's arrival and sighed in relief. "You've finally come, Tarnas, your majesty. These people claim to be merchants from Gondor. They arrived with a caravan after hearing your name, but they couldn't produce proper identification, so I had them wait. They've caused no trouble. They've been patient as I asked." Tarns nodded and looked toward the ragged group. "And those over there?" Kenneth shook his head. "I don't know. They didn't come with the caravan. They walked up from a distance and stopped while I was speaking with these merchants. I sent soldiers to ask their purpose, but they wouldn't answer or disperse. I'm not sure what they mean to do." "Then let's handle one thing at a time," Tarns said. Kenneth made way, and Tarnis went to meet the caravan. It was larger than the dwarf caravans that had visited before, at least 10 carriages at a glance. The ruts in the mud showed they carried heavy loads. Tarnis also noticed signs of attack, some minor damage to the carriages, and bandaged wounds on the escorts. "Greetings, Lord. I am Gay of Los Arnor in Gondor, a land of flowers and snow," the lead merchant said. He had already guessed Tarns's identity from Kenneth's actions. Gay was a man of about 40, blue-eyed, with long golden hair and a neatly trimmed beard. His clothes were travel-worn but neat. Despite the fatigue on his face, he straightened himself when Tarns approached. The other merchants lowered their heads when he spoke. Gay was clearly the caravan's leader. Tarns fixed him with a steady look. "My men say you can't prove you're merchants from Gondor. How am I to believe you?" Embarrassment flashed across Gay's face. He produced a silver badge from his chest, a flower carved on it. "My name is Gay. This is my family badge. Everyone in Gondor recognizes it." Tarns raised an eyebrow. "This is the golden tree. I need documents that prove your identity, not a family emblem." He was already noting the difference in customs. Dwarves here always carried detailed written documents, formal, often lengthy proofs of identity. A single badge might carry weight in Gondor or Rohan, but not in his lands. Gay, left with little choice in front of a powerful wizard, quickly folded the badge away and spoke plainly. "Lord, on our way here we were attacked by orcs. We barely escaped to Shubard to shake them off. But Shubard is a ruin, impassable swamps. We lost several carriages there. The identification papers were with the goods in one of those lost wagons. If not for that attack, our caravan would have been even larger. I only have this family badge now. I beg your understanding." Tarns listened, then nodded. Rogier and Dee had told him recently about the dangers of Shubard. Unless one had been there, one could scarcely imagine its swamps. A rational person fleeing orcs would detour around Shubard, so choosing to cross it meant they had been desperate. Tarns believed him. Gay relaxed and bowed. "Thank you for your tolerance and benevolence, Lord." "No need to thank me yet," Tarnas said. "I'll provisionally accept your identity, but what goods do you mean to sell?" Gay brightened. "Easy to explain. Minas Tirith is rich in fruit and flowers. I've brought many fruits and flower seeds native to Gondor. The fruits are preserved for long travel and will not spoil. For each seed type, I've brought fresh specimens so people here can choose." "Fruits and flower seeds," Tarnas nodded. He pointed to the largest, heaviest wrapped wagon in the middle. "What's in that carriage?" Gay glanced around, then stepped forward and lowered his voice. "My lord, that carriage contains humble gifts, tokens to thank you for your hospitality." Tarns recalled what Gandalf had warned. Many would come because of the wizard's name. He said nothing but turned to Kenneth. "Lead this caravan into the territory." "Yes, Tarnas, your majesty." Kenneth moved forward, and as he passed Tarns whispered, "When they sell, find a few familiar dwarves to keep their prices honest." "Understood," Kenneth whispered back, then put on a warm, welcoming smile. "Mr. Gay, please follow me. I will arrange a suitable area for you to sell your goods." Gay wanted to say more, but Kenneth's genial invitation took precedence. He followed Kenneth, smile fixed, as they guided the carriages slowly into the Golden Tree's lands. At the same time, the ragged group stirred. Several able-bodied men jogged forward. The knight captain instantly drew his greatsword and threw himself before Tarns. The sun flashed off the blade, and the royal army soldiers drew their weapons, pointing them at the men. 3 halted in fear, but the man in front waved something in his hand and kept coming. Tarns raised a hand. "Sheath your weapons. Let that man come forward." The knight captain hesitated only a moment before putting his sword away. The soldiers did likewise, though the captain shifted slightly, so Tarns was not completely exposed. Sometimes Tarnis thought he didn't need such protection, but he respected the knight's duty and let them keep their positions. The man stopped about 10 paces away, panting and waving a tattered scrap. "Lord Tarns, are you Lord Tarns?" he called. "How does he know my name?" Tarns glanced at Nephili. She looked as puzzled as he felt. The man held out the worn paper for Tarns to see. "Where did you hear my name?" Tarns asked. The man's bravado shrank under the soldier's watchful gazes. He stammered, breathless. "A gray-robed wizard, Gandalf. He saved us from orcs after our village was destroyed. He gave me this letter and told me to go southwest, to Minhiriath, to the Golden Tree. There is a wizard named Tarns there." Tarns's eyes brightened. "You saw Gandalf? Where is he now?" The man shook his head. "I don't know. After he gave me the letter, he went east." Tarns felt a twinge of disappointment. "Give me the letter. I want to see it." The man glanced at the knight captain, then shuffled forward and handed the letter. The captain stepped forward to inspect it, and Tarns's gaze caught a familiar rune on the seal, the same mark Gandalf had shown him. "Give it to me. This is Gandalf's handwriting," Tarns said. The knight captain, who had been ready to check for poison, respectfully handed the envelope over. Tarnas read, "My dear Tarnas, if you are reading this, you have already met these poor people. I know it is an unreasonable request, but beyond your territory, I can think of no one who could take them in. Their homes have been destroyed by orcs. Without help, they will freeze or starve this winter. I met them near the Gladden River. Orcs and even trolls have been destroying villages there. This means Middle-earth is heading into a time of unrest. I have yet to find Thrain, Thorin's father, but Thorin's expedition to the Lonely Mountain cannot be delayed. The dwarves must reclaim the mountain and establish a solid defense before this coming turmoil. I will search for Thrain for 1 more month. If I still cannot find him, I will go to the Blue Mountains to seek Thorin and help him launch the expedition to the Lonely Mountain. Please, take these people in. They are good folk, farmers and herders, not idle beggars, and they will certainly aid in rebuilding your territory. Gratefully yours for your generosity and benevolence." Gandalf Tarns folded the letter thoughtfully, the new burden of responsibility settling on him as the voices in the courtyard murmured and the wind moved through the branches of the Golden Tree. Chapter 55, The Last 2 Members of the Expeditionary Force. Tarns finished reading the letter and, as he folded it, noticed how well preserved it was, worn but not torn, proof that the messenger had done everything possible to keep it intact. He looked up at the middle-aged man who had handed it to him. The man's face was hopeful, and his hands were clasped together nervously. "How many of you came in total?" Tarns asked. The man blinked in confusion and glanced back over his shoulder. I'm not sure. Maybe just over 20. Only 7 or 8 families from the village made it out intact. A few scattered survivors from other houses might have joined, and some dropped off on the way, so it should be just us now." Tarns suppressed a sigh. He couldn't rely on the man's imprecise estimates. He turned to Nephili Lu. "Nephili, contact Roderica at Kenneth Haight's fort. Have her register these refugees and record their skills." Nephili nodded, but didn't immediately leave. "Anything else?" Tarns thought for a moment, then added, "Have Arena prepare liquid rations for them and arrange lodgings near where Mills and his people are staying." "Understood." Nephili left at once. Tarns addressed the middle-aged man again. "Gandalf requested I take you in. You managed to survive and come this far, so I will not refuse you." Relief washed over the man's face at Tarns's words, but Tarns's tone sharpened and made him nervous again. "My acceptance is conditional. You must obey the laws of my territory. Joining means you will no longer starve or die of disease, but I have no use for idlers or people of ill repute." The man nodded fervently. "Please, my lord, we will obey." Tarnas gave him one last look and then spoke to the knight captain. "Be vigilant. Protect Roderica at all costs." "At your command, Tarns, your majesty," the knight captain barked, standing straighter. Tarns smiled, patted the captain's shoulder, and left under the captain's watchful gaze. He had other matters to attend to, summoning the final members for the Lonely Mountain expedition and checking the Golden Tree's reserves of blessing to ensure they were sufficient. It wasn't that Tarns hadn't considered alternate candidates earlier. He'd hesitated because he didn't know when the expedition would launch and had preferred to let the Golden Tree's blessings accumulate naturally to summon more people for the lands between. His territory was vast and thinly populated, one reason Gandalf had urged the refugees to come here. Even now, more than 60% of the houses in Stormvale City stood empty, and Moan City had only just reached full occupancy a few days earlier. Summoning newcomers without places to put them would be pointless. As Tarns made his way back toward Stormvale, a merchant, Gay, a noble trader from Lozarnock in the Gondor Kingdom, arrived on the outskirts of Moan City. His exterior betrayed little, but inside his heart raced. In the distance, twin golden trees rose above Stormvale, and whole stretches of forest and grassland gleamed like they'd been dusted with gold. He'd never seen such enormous trees, nor vegetation that shone in that way. It was clearly not the dull yellow of autumn decay, but a vibrant, living gold. Kenneth Haight, observing Gay's fascination, smiled. "If you're wondering whether they're made of gold, Mr. Gay, they're not. The plants have turned golden in color, but they remain plants at their core." Gay felt a brief disappointment that quickly faded. If it had been literal gold, he'd worry about the economic chaos it would cause back home. "May I pluck a leaf as a keepsake?" he asked. "You may," Kenneth said with a chuckle. "You're not the first to be curious." Gay cleared his throat and smiled. "Then I shall. Have others visited this place before?" "You're the first human caravan to travel this far from Gondor," Kenneth replied. "Both Tarns and I admire the perseverance it took to find us." Relieved, Gay praised their hospitality. "Minheriath has been neglected for so long. Meeting Lord Tarns and you, Lord Kenneth Haight, has made the journey worthwhile." A boisterous group of dwarves from the Blue Mountains passed the caravan, greeting Kenneth before heading into Moan City. Gay's eyes widened. "Were those dwarves?" "Yes," Kenneth said. "Tarns is on good terms with the dwarves of the Blue Mountains. We trade frequently." Gay's excitement rose. He'd expected this trip to be merely a diplomatic effort to introduce himself to the new wizard, but the possibility of buying dwarven wares, tools, household items, even dwarf-made weapons, promised handsome profit. Soon, two elves approached and bowed lightly to Kenneth, briefly nodding to Gay before moving on. Gay rubbed his eyes and looked to Kenneth, astonished. "Elves?" "They're from Rivendell," Kenneth said, smiling. "Tarns is allied with Lord Elrond. A contingent of elves came to live in Tarns's territory. The elves had intended to stay only a short while, but as the Golden Tree grew, they became attached and lingered longer than expected. Kenneth advised Gay, "Don't expect regular trade from them. They'll buy or sell when it suits them. They're friends of Tarns. Don't harass them." Gay nodded eagerly, his imagination already working through deals and profits. Meanwhile, Tarns stood in the courtyard beneath the Golden Tree, thinking about the expedition. This time, they were facing a massive dragon. He needed companions with dragon fighting experience. Two who had fought alongside him and survived were Yura, the Bloodfingers hunter, and Egon, the dragon warrior. Egon was already on his summon list. He'd stood with Tarns against Bale, the mad dragon. Yura's case was more complicated. Yura had fought Egil with Tarns, but had been claimed by the Mad Flame's parasite after his death. If Tarns remembered correctly, Yura's corruption was even worse than Arena's. Throughout Tarns's 8 cycles of rebirth, he had tried to save this hunter, but always failed. Now, with the Elden Ring at his command, Tarns wondered whether he could summon Yura and purge the parasite. The parasite, Shabriri, had taken Yura's corpse after Yura fell fighting Eleonora the pureblood Bloodfingers. But how deep the infection went and when Yura had first been corrupted were unknowns. Against the Mad Flame, Tarnis had to be cautious. Reluctantly, He decided not to summon Yura now. He felt regret, not only for Yura, but for the terrible power of Eleonora, who had worn Dragon Knight gear, a mark of a master dragon hunter. Still, Tarnas had someone of even higher priority in mind, a warrior far stronger, if only her scarlet rot could be suppressed. Tarns produced a slender golden needle the length of his index finger and focused his will into the Elden Ring. As the blessings converged, a figure coalesced, a slender, strong, one-armed woman with loose scarlet hair and pale green clothing. She looked around, bewildered, until her golden eyes fixed on Tarnas. "Tarnas, where is this?" She began. A sudden searing pain cut her off as scarlet mist began to boil from her skin. Tarnas moved quickly. He plunged the golden needle into her body, channeling the Elden Ring's blessing through it. The scarlet mist hissed and then slowly dissipated. Tarnas stepped back and offered a gentle smile. "Welcome home, Millicent." Millicent had arrived. Chapter 56, Gandalf's Feast Invitation. When the pain in Millicent's body subsided enough to let her breathe, she gave Tarns a weak smile. "Thank you, Tarnas." He met her golden eyes and asked quietly, "Have all your memories come back?" Millicent nodded, memory and hurt mingling in her expression. "Yes, the memories returned with the pain of the scarlet rot. I don't know how you came here, but congratulations. You didn't yield to fate. You chose your own path." Her mouth curved into a bright, relieved smile. "So, what do you need me to do this time?" Tarns smiled back and pulled a finely crafted golden prosthesis from his spatial pack. "Do you remember what you told me after you recovered? You said you wanted to travel." It was the Valkyrie's prosthesis. Millicent took it in her one good arm and, with a nostalgic look, said, "You kept this, I remember, but I never thought I'd say the same thing to you 8 times. Tarns leaned forward and helped her slide the prosthesis into place. "Then I'm inviting you on a new journey. Our ultimate destination will be to face a dragon. I don't suppose you'll refuse." She flexed the prosthetic hand and smiled. "I can't think of any reason to refuse. My sword is still willing to swing for you." She reached into a pocket, produced a hair tie, and tied her crimson hair back into a short ponytail. Then she glanced up at the golden tree and the phantom branches beyond. "I've never seen the golden tree like this. I suppose a great many stories have happened since I left. Maybe I should call you the Elden Lord now?" Tarns grimaced, amused. "Don't make me sound so grand. With our friendship, the title feels too distant. Just call me Tarnas." Millicent smiled faintly. "Melania called herself Michaela's Blade. Maybe I should be Tarna's Blade. Not a bad name." "If you like," Tarns said. "Call yourself that to outsiders if you want, but between us, names are fine. I'm going to summon another companion for this adventure." "Who?" Millicent asked. "Dragon warrior Egon," Tarnas answered. "You won't know him. He's someone I met later in the Shadowland." Millicent made a mental note of the unfamiliar name. Tarns placed his hand on the thick trunk of the golden tree. A golden figure coalesced at his side. Tall, weathered, with a great bow strapped to his back by ropes of braided grass and dragon bone, the wood and bone pitted with countless claw marks. His quiver was stuffed with massive shafted arrows, tips of sharp broken stone that suggested he'd been in ancient dragon territories. His armor was a mismatched patchwork of plates and scrap. A tattered conical hat shadowed his face. For a moment, the man stared at Tarns in confusion. Then recognition and memory flooded him. The dying roar of the mad dragon Bale and the thunder of battle flashed through his mind. He threw his head back and laughed, raucous and victorious. "Ha ha! Mad dragon Bale, you finally died! Slain by human hands. The dragon warrior is the embodiment of your fear." Egon paid little heed to the extra memories. What mattered was that he and Tarns had slain Bale. When his laughter trailed off, Tarns ventured, "Feeling better, Egon?" "Ha ha, much better. This old man's wish is fulfilled. My life is yours to command." Egon grinned. Tarns' smile turned sly. "Don't get ahead of yourself. I summoned you because there's another dragon still harming the living." A feral grin split Egon's face. His golden irises widened. "Then, I'll use my harpoon and show that dragon what a dragon warrior is. Show it true fear." "Harpoon?" Millicent interrupted. "You mean a fishing harpoon?" Tarns chuckled. "He means the huge arrows he makes, his harpoons he fires from that bow, not a literal harpoon for the sky." Millicent relaxed into an amused look. Egon's eye caught her then. Is she another hand you found for dragon slaying? She looks hardened, but toughness alone won't cut it against dragons." Millicent was not offended. She answered respectfully, "You're right, dragon warrior. I've only downed one lava worm with tarns. For foes that take to the sky, your experience surely exceeds mine. I hope to learn from you." Egon laughed out loud. "Of course. I welcome another dragon warrior to the hunt." Millicent glanced at Tarns. "You're a dragon warrior too? Since when?" Tarns could have listed a half-dozen titles. He merely shrugged. Millicent shook her head and smiled. "That was a foolish question. Every time I see you, your role changes. Carrion Knight, Pureblood Knight, Carrion Royal Inquisitor. I'm not surprised you could be a dragon warrior." Tarns changed the subject. "You've only just been summoned back. There's much to catch up on. I'll show you around and explain the state of this world. We'll also meet Bernal. He's joining the expedition." They walked and talked. Egon scanned the city as they passed. "I remember Stormvale, the Storm King's place. But after the Shadowlands sealed, all of this is different. What happened to the lands between? It's not how I recall it." Millicent listened intently to Tarn's account of his experiences since her death. Time slipped by. Another month passed. As Gandalf had predicted, human merchant caravans kept arriving from the east, Rohan or Gondor, most of them intending to confront the wizard, like Gay had. None of them expected to buy much. Yet the fruits and vegetables grown under the golden tree were unlike anything they'd tasted, both easy to store and extraordinary in flavor. The merchants bought in bulk, and with dwarven handicrafts, wooden toys and trinkets, left with a handsome profit. They wondered at the rare elves they glimpsed, but those elves did not trade or speak to them. If anyone fared worse than the merchants in general, it was Gay. He had brought long-distance goods, mostly fruits, that, after a long trip, could not compare to these fresh, magically ripe fruits. Worse, some of the fruits he brought were inferior to what the golden tree produced. Only his flower seeds seemed initially promising. Golden nobles and some elves praised the blooms he described. Gay took heart and planted many of the seeds in the hope of preserving specimens to sell elsewhere in Gondor. To his astonishment, within a week those seeds sprouted and bloomed. Where his men reported that the seeds had already flowered, Gay went himself to see, and he was forced to accept the magic of this land. He planted all the rest, especially the varieties that in his homeland took longest to flower, planning to make specimens later. When Tarns heard this from Kenneth Haight, he couldn't help admiring Gay's quick thinking. The merchant would have been delighted to know his efforts had impressed Tarns. Besides the merchants, Tarns also summoned a new location within the lands between that month. Morn Tunnel, a mine. With it, he no longer had to worry about weapons and armor wearing out. Fili and Kili took their leave as well, pausing their battle skill studies. Thorin had sent letters, one to Fili and Kili, one to Tarns. The Fellowship of the Lonely Mountain was nearly assembled. Thorin wrote, only Fili and Kili remained to be gathered. He planned one last attempt to persuade the representatives of the 7 dwarf kingdoms. If that failed, he would set out with the expedition he had. Thorin also passed on a note from Gandalf. He had found a burglar in Hobbiton and asked the expedition members to come to the Shire. Tarns raised an eyebrow. Gandalf knew Bilbo Baggins, but Tarns didn't think Bilbo was the burglar Gandalf meant. Bilbo seemed an ordinary sort of hobbit, not a master thief. Tarns suspected Gandalf had someone else in mind. Not long after Fili and Kili left, a thrush arrived in the Golden Tree territory. It darted into Stormvale Castle and made straight for the City Lord Hall window, cocking its small brown head and tapping the glass with its beak. Tarns looked up, saw the bird and the tiny paper tube tied to its leg, took a few raisins from the fruit plate, opened the window, and spread his palm. The thrush hopped in without fear and pecked happily at the raisins. Tarns untied the cylinder and unrolled the note. Gandalf's neat handwriting curved across the page. My dearest Tarnis, it is time for a great adventure. I invite you to Hobbiton for the departure feast of the Lonely Mountain expedition. The place is familiar to us both, Bilbo Baggins' home. Be sure not to be late, or the dwarves will start eating without you. If they knew you were coming, I think they'd wait. Your old friend, Gandalf. Tarns stroked the thrush's head. The little bird chirped contentedly. The expedition was truly beginning. Chapter 57, The Stirring Heart of Adventure, November, 3rd Age, 2939. In an ordinary winter morning in Hobbiton, something nobody had expected began to stir. Bilbo Baggins sat happily on his doorstep with a pipe between his fingers, eyes closed, enjoying the quiet. He was not expecting company when an old man in a tall, pointed blue hat, leaning on a staff, came into view. "Good morning, Gandalf," Bilbo called cheerfully. The sun shone bright and the grass was green as ever. Gandalf peered at him over his long brows, as if about to speak. Bilbo went on in a sing-song voice. "I mean, you have a good morning whether you like it or not. I feel particularly good this morning, a morning to be enjoyed." Gandalf's expression tightened. Bilbo raised an eyebrow and grinned, clearly pleased with himself. Gandalf cleared his throat. "You're very good at turning my words back on me, Bilbo, but you cannot pretend to repeat everything I said to you last time and call it your own." Bilbo shrugged. "If I hadn't, you'd surely have said the very same thing again." "Perhaps," Gandalf admitted with mock innocence. Bilbo blinked in a most disarming way. "Shall I put it another way? Good morning could mean this is a good morning to stand on a doorstep and smoke a pipe." He glanced at Gandalf's waist, spotted a pipe, and chuckled. "Since you brought yours, why not sit and share some of mine? No hurry, we have all day to waste." He popped his pipe into his mouth, crossed his legs, took a long draw, and blew a perfect smoke ring that drifted lazily over the hill. Gandalf tapped his staff lightly, and the ring changed shape into a smoke butterfly that fluttered and with a mischievous little twist sailed straight into Bilbo's nostril. Bilbo coughed and scowled. "The smoke ring was a fine one, Bilbo," Gandalf said mildly. "But I don't have time for idle company this morning." Bilbo sighed. "So what do you want now? Last time you dropped by, you asked me about Tarns, then left in a hurry without even staying for a meal." Gandalf's eyes twinkled. "Bilbo Baggins, I am planning an adventure, and I am looking for folks to join me. Finding the right sort is not easy. Coincidentally, the other day I met a hobbit who said he longed to go out and see the world." Bilbo set his pipe aside, smoothed his jacket with nervous fingers, and said, "Adventure, you say? Who on earth would want such a thing? Bothering and uncomfortable, if you ask me." He hooked his thumbs into his suspenders and from the mailbox pulled out a stack of letters to pretend to study them. Gandalf stood and watched him, patient as a tree. "Pretending to forget what you yourself said is not a virtue," Gandalf remarked finally. Bilbo tucked the letters under his arm and pointed his pipe at the wizard. "Forcing me to take part in an adventure is not a virtue either. Now I'm going in to have 2 cakes, to calm my nerves, you understand. If I told you that people you know are going, would that change your mind?" Gandalf asked. Bilbo's foot paused inside the doorway. "Who?" Gandalf smiled. "Tarnies, for one, and perhaps a few of his friends." Mention of Tarns made Bilbo's face light up for a breath. Then he swiftly turned it into a look of practical composure. "Ah, well, I have several chapters about Tarns to finish writing today in that case. Yes, I shall be indoors all day, writing." He opened his mouth as though to say more, closed it, and at last called, "Good morning." Gandalf's smile was all amusement. "Your good morning is flexible enough to mean go away, is it? Very well. If I don't leave, your morning will not be a good one, I suppose." "Oh, heavens." Bilbo feigned annoyance. "I have no wish to go adventuring, thank you. Not today. I'm busy." He ducked into Bag End, then poked his head back out. "Tea? You are welcome any time. Tomorrow, perhaps." "Gandalf, goodbye." He slammed the round green door shut, leaned against it, and muttered to himself, "Why did I promise him tea?" But the smell from the pantry soon distracted him, and he padded inside with a smile. 2 cakes and a pot of tea would surely put him right. Outside, Gandalf chuckled softly, tapped a curious rune on the green door with the tip of his staff, and stood for a moment peering in at the round window. Bilbo, having polished off his second cake, came to the door for some choice tea leaves and caught sight of the wizard's face peering in. He stepped back with a start, breath held, until Gandalf gave a little wave and went off with long strides. Bilbo exhaled and set about brewing his tea, convinced he had at least postponed any further talk of adventures. Still, when Gandalf spoke of Tarns, a small stir of excitement had run through him. Rogier's recent visit and his tales of Tarns' exploits had filled Bilbo's imagination. If there was an adventure to be had, Tarnis's would be the sort that made one's heart beat faster. Bilbo chuckled at himself, set the cup to his lips, and scolded the foolish thought. There was no place for such things in Bag End. Hobbits were not sword fighters. They were not born for trouble. By the next day, Bilbo had almost forgotten the entire affair, unless he had written it down in his planner, which he had not. After a leisurely breakfast, he sat on the doorstep with his pipe until near noon, when he rose, brushed his jacket, and decided to go to the market for a fresh fish. His larder was well stocked with salted ones, but today he fancied a cod fried with butter and bacon. The market lay on the other side of the water, down narrow flagstone paths. Sunlight sifted through a few clouds, dappling the canvas awnings of the stalls. Fresh vegetables lay heaped upon boards, bright carrots, leafy greens, good potatoes, all promising the week's harvest. Vendors shouted friendly bargains. Here a farmer's wife picked out a tomato with care. There a butcher chopped at lamb with a steady thud that mingled with the warm smell of roasting ovens. Bakers displayed loaves still hot from the stone, and the spice sellers' jars of red, yellow, and green powders glinted in the sun. Horses clattered as carts were unloaded, and hobbit children darted through the crowd shrieking with laughter. Bilbo found his usual fish stall and greeted the burly fisherman behind it, Fredegar, who was busily scaling and gutting with hands as rough as rope. "Hey, Fredegar, give me your finest cod," Bilbo called. Fredegar grinned and picked a plump, shimmering cod from a barrel where the fish still thrashed. He severed its head with a single, efficient blow, wrapped it in oiled paper, and handed it over. "All right, Bilbo, how've you been?" "Very well, thank you," Bilbo answered with a twitch of his eyebrows, "except for a gray-robed wizard with a pointed hat who said odd things yesterday. But he's not here today, so I'm fine." Bilbo paid, exchanged a few more pleasantries, and went home with his prize. The cod fried in butter and bacon was everything a hobbit could want, golden, crisp, and eaten with the contented air only a well-fed hobbit can wear. Evening slipped by, and Bilbo sat staring at the moon, indecisive about what to do for supper, when the sound of boots and clanking armor drifted up the lane. A familiar, laughing voice called, "Bilbo! Good evening. Been a long while. You looking as lazy as ever? How about treating me and my friends to a good meal?" Tarn stood at the gate with Millicent, Bernal, and Egon in a neat line behind him. Bilbo could not hide his surprise. "Tarnis, how are you here?" The dazed hobbit was instantly all energy. He bounded down the steps, flung the door wide, and wrapped Tarnis in a warm, hospitable embrace. Tarnis bent down to return it, then stepped back. "Someone said there was to be a rowdy dinner here, but I found the host lost in thought. Anything amiss?" Bilbo, still partly bewildered, recovered with a chuckle and a hospitable nod to each of Tarnis's companions. "Trouble? Not at all. Welcome. There will be plenty of food and wine tonight." Chapter 58, Guests Arriving One After Another. Bag End smelled wonderful. Sweet fruit, fragrant slices of cheese, bacon and ham giving off a savory aroma, freshly baked biscuits, and fine honey sat ready to be spread on the dining table. At the table's center rested a steaming roasted leg of lamb dusted with cumin and chili, and a golden roast chicken surrounded by ripe red tomatoes and rings of purple onion. Bilbo entertained Tarns and his companions with the warmest hospitality. The little hobbit finally allowed himself to sit after half a day of bustling about, smiling as he took it all in. Tarns wasn't idle. While Bilbo prepared the meal, he helped with simple tasks, washing vegetables and fruit, fetching things from cupboards. Hobbits were the better cooks, but the help was appreciated. Bernal and the others who'd come with Tarns, seeing him lend a hand, felt awkward to stay idle and, embarrassed, stepped into the kitchen as well. Bilbo was both amused and a little put out. It was a tight squeeze with 4 tall humans in his kitchen, but they were helpful. The middle-aged man in silver armor and a crimson-haired girl sliced spare vegetables with astonishing skill and arranged them neatly. The bacon and ham were cut into uniform, thin pieces. Bilbo couldn't quite see why they prepared so much. There was enough to feed a dozen hearty eaters. The most surprising thing was the robust old man, weathered and bold, who took the marinated leg of lamb out to roast. He handled the fire perfectly. As the aroma drifted in, Bilbo's mouth watered. Years of gourmand experience told him the lamb and turkey outside would be exquisite. So when Bilbo sat at the table, he raised his tiny wine glass and announced with relish, "I've said it before, but I'll say it again. Welcome to Bag End. We all made this feast together. It must be the best meal I've ever tasted." Tarns lifted his wooden cup. It didn't hold red wine, but orange juice squeezed from citrus picked that morning. He disliked alcohol. He preferred the sweetness of fruit juice. Bilbo had suggested a little sugar. Hobbits knew how to enjoy themselves, and it brightened the flavor. Millicent, like Tarnis, chose a non-alcoholic drink. It wasn't that she hated drinking. As Tarns's blade, she needed to remain clear-headed. Bernal and Egon, the two older men, preferred golden ale to red wine and drank more freely. The Hobbit and 4 humans clinked their cups. Bilbo, impatient to begin, reached for the lamb, but Tarns set his cup down and said, "Shouldn't we wait for the others?" Bilbo's knife froze. "Others? Did you bring more friends? Are they late?" "No," Tarnis replied. "These 3 are the ones I brought. Why? But this dinner was arranged by Gandalf, and he isn't here. From what I hear, there should be more arriving." Bilbo's face lit with sudden remembrance. "Of course, Gandalf. How could I forget? I invited him for tea yesterday. He hasn't come by yet, and I was wondering if the old wizard had forgotten." He put the knife down and blinked. "Shall we wait a little?" Just then the bell on the front door tinkled. Bilbo beamed. "See, Gandalf's here. Stay seated. I'll open the door." And could someone fetch another set of cutlery for the wizard? He hopped up, his big, hairy, bare feet pattering across the floor as he hurried to the round green door. "Sorry, Gandalf. I nearly forgot. Do come in." The door swung inward, and Bilbo was ready to smile in welcome, only to be surprised. It wasn't Gandalf at all, but a bald dwarf, only a little taller than Bilbo, his beard tucked into his brown collar, bright eyes peering from beneath a deep green hood. He walked straight in, as if he had been expected, hung his cloak on a hook, and bowed deeply. "Dwalin, at your service." Bilbo Baggins at your service," Bilbo replied, straightening his clothes and recovering his manners. He was flustered, unsure what to ask, and eager to avoid awkward silence. "I'm enjoying dinner with my friends, though I don't know why you're so familiar. You're welcome to join us." Dwalin's certainty only grew. He nodded, the lamplight catching his shiny scalp. "I came precisely for this banquet. Are they all here? Am I late?" Bilbo blinked. "Wait, do we know each other? Who else is coming?" Dwalin followed the smell of food into the room, and Bilbo, a little bewildered, trailed along. Tarnis stood to greet Dwalin and pulled him into a big hug. "Dwalin, it's been ages. Thorin told me about you. Nephili Lu asked me to check whether you'd mastered the footwork she taught." Dwalin hadn't expected Tarns to be here. His previously aloof manner towards Bilbo shifted to polite respect. "Lord Tarns, I'm honored. Lady Nepheli's lessons served me well. My thanks." Tarnis patted his shoulder and gestured to a seat. Dwalin glanced at the laden table, a smile spreading beneath his beard, which trembled with excitement. Bilbo shuffled closer and asked, "Is he also your friend?" "Yes, though he did not come with me," Tarnis said. Bilbo scratched his head. "I don't understand, but if he's your friend, he's welcome. For 6 people, this table will just about hold." "Didn't Gandalf tell you?" Tarnis asked. Bilbo looked startled. "Tell me what?" The bell rang again. This time it sounded particularly polite. Tarnis pointed and said, "Tonight, besides me and my companions, a large number of dwarves will be here. That's why we prepared extra." Bilbo gaped. "Me? Of course not. He invited me on an adventure. No, I refused. I only asked him for tea. He's brought a group of dwarves to my house?" At that moment, the door opened to a kindly voice. "What heavens! Have you met with difficulty?" Bilbo blurted, "Difficult? No," and then saw who stood in the doorway. An older dwarf with a snowy white beard, wearing a loose, deep red coat, smiling and spreading his arms. "Balin, at your service." Bilbo's mouth moved. "Good evening." "Thank you." Balin lowered his arms and glanced up at the moonlight. "Yes, lovely weather tonight." He came in as if he had been invited, noticing Dwalin's cloak on the hook. "Seems someone's already arrived." Bilbo's hospitable instincts stopped him from refusing. He closed the door and led Balin to the kitchen. "If you mean these people, they are here," he said, though unease pricked him. He liked guests, but he preferred knowing they were coming. His mind flicked to the biscuits in the pantry. Perhaps they wouldn't be enough. Balin bowed briefly to Tarnis, then squeezed up to Dwalin and found no extra chair. "Any more chairs?" he asked. Chairs? Bilbo stammered. Oh, just a moment. Before he could fetch one, the bell rang urgently. Tarnas offered, I'll move some chairs from the pantry. Go and open the door. Perhaps I can fetch more ale, Dwalin added. Bilbo hurried. Surely this time it would be Gandalf. He opened the door to two dwarves, one with a yellow beard and laden with weaponry, the other with a short black beard and a bow slung across his back. Fili, Kili, at your service, they shouted together and strolled into the house as if it were their own. Kili praised the place. This is a really nice home. Fili nodded and in a friendly gesture removed a sword from his waist and offered it to Bilbo, who accepted it out of reflex. Tarns, carrying extra chairs, poked his head in. Fili, Kili, good evening. At the sight of Tarns, the two dwarves immediately became respectful. Kili even withdrew the foot he had just prepared to wipe on a nearby wooden box. Teacher Tarnas, they greeted. Come in and help. There might not be enough seats, Tarnas said. Your teacher Bernal is inside. You can greet him. After they entered, Bilbo muttered to Tarnas, How many dwarves did Gandalf find? I can't believe half the guests in my house are dwarves. Tarnas patted his shoulder. I don't know. Gandalf should have said how many would come. I'll have a word with him. Oh, I'm not turning them away, Bilbo hurried to add. I just wish we'd been introduced properly first. Tarnas agreed. Of course. And the doorbell rang again. Ding dong, ding dong. Bilbo's expression turned to one of resigned despair as he went to open the door. This time, the exclamations hit him all at once as a stream of dwarves tumbled into Bag End, crowding in and filling the doorway. He stared at Tarns. Is Gandalf bringing the whole dwarf family to my house? Gandalf chuckled from the doorway and squeezed past a heap of dwarves. Ho ho. Of course not, Bilbo Baggins. These are the last of the guests. Behind Gandalf strode a handsome dwarf with a proud bearing, Thorin Oakenshield. Thorin pushed his way inside with the others, looked at Bilbo with a steady, appraising glance, and inclined his head in a brief nod of greeting. Chapter 59, The Feast. Tarns and his companions were too tall to move about comfortably in Bag End, so the dwarves took on the job of shifting the table and the food into a larger room. Fili, Kili, and Dwalin worked hardest. The others, with practiced stealth, slipped into Bilbo's pantry, chattering about what they wanted to eat. Dori came over carrying a teapot. Mr. Gandalf, would you care for some chamomile? He asked. Gandalf, leaning against the wall so as not to get in the way, shook his head with a wry smile. No, thank you. I'd rather have some red wine. Thorin, passing with a stool and overhearing, immediately added, Make mine wine as well. Dori bowed and retreated, leaving the rest to the feast. Beefer, the dwarf with a broken axe head still lodged in his hair, grunted in Dwarvish about raspberry jam and apple pie. Bofer, hooded and sporting two long black beards, wanted mince pies and cheese. Bomber, the fattest of them, belched and bellowed for pork pies and salad by the cartload. You've already eaten an entire leg of lamb, Bomber. Gloin snapped as he hauled a barrel of ale past, catching Bomber slowly scraping a bone clean. Bomber simply emitted an even louder belch in reply. Gloin wrinkled his nose, shouldered the barrel, and marched past Tarns, suddenly sober and respectful. Lord Tarns, a pleasure to meet you again. Tarns smiled. He remembered Gloin, the captain who had caused a small misunderstanding when Tarns first arrived in the Blue Mountains. A pleasant evening to you, Tarnas returned. Bilbo, watching all this with a mixture of resentment and amazement, strode up to Tarns and pointed at Gandalf. How do these dwarves know my pantry better than I do? He demanded. He sounded as if his home had been broken into by a band of brazen robbers. Gandalf blinked serenely. Tarnas reproached him lightly. Gandalf, you might have warned Bilbo they were coming. Not everyone tolerates a dwarf's familiarity. I had no time yesterday, Gandalf answered innocently. Our hobbit shut me out when I tried to call. He locked the door on me. Bilbo looked as if he had been struck. Me? But I invited you in for tea today. I didn't expect so many guests. Look at my kitchen, mud on the carpet. He glanced at Bofer and Dori, who were passing, and swiftly softened his tone. Oh no, of course I welcome you. Please, do stay. He muttered under his breath. It would be better if we knew each other, a bit in advance. Bofer smiled. We know, and walked on. Dori appeared with the carafe of Bilbo's treasured red wine and two small glasses. He poured carefully and handed them to Gandalf and Thorin. Mr. Gandalf, Lord Thorin, a small glass of red with a nice fruity nose, he announced. Bilbo, aghast, hissed to Tarns, "Did you see that? He's using my own wine." Tarns tried not to smile. Gandalf averted his gaze, lifted his glass, and clinked it with Thorin's. The dwarves worked with astonishing speed. Bottles, platters, cutlery, cups, and bowls appeared and were piled on the long table. Thorin took the head seat. Gandalf sat to his right, Tarn as opposite, while Bernal and the others took their places. The dwarves greeted Bernal, Millicent, and Egon just as warmly as the rest. No one was ignored. Bilbo perched on a stool by the fire, nipping at a buttered roll he had rescued from a plate, trying very hard to look composed. When Thorin raised his mug and smiled at Tarns, standing to speak, Bilbo straightened. "We are grateful for your presence tonight," Thorin said solemnly, then announced loudly, "Let the feast begin." Fili and Kili cheered. Bombur, as if on cue, went for his second leg of lamb. Gloin snorted, "Good heavens, Bombur!" Bofur saw and tossed a peeled hard-boiled egg into Bombur's mouth. Bombur opened wide, caught it neatly, chewed and swallowed, then crowed triumphantly. The table resounded with laughter and slaps. Thorin watched, smiling quietly as he ate his soup. Bilbo moved closer to Tarns and whispered, "Are they always like this?" Tarns studied the merry chaos and said mildly, "Honestly, Bilbo, I think they've reined themselves in." "Reined themselves in?" Bilbo repeated incredulously. "That's what you call reined in?" Millicent, sitting to Tarns's left, sympathized. "If you lived with them longer, you'd see how much more they can get away with. They're only behaving because of Lord Tarns." Dwalin stood and shouted, 3, 2, 1, drink. The dwarves fell silent for a heartbeat, then raised their mugs and drank in unison, punctuating the toast with a great chorus of burps. Ori, thin and quietly dignified, produced the longest burp of the night to cheers from the company. Bernal replaced his empty wineglass and, chatting with Fili and Kili, asked after their training. Gloin, sitting nearby, raised his cup to Bernal with a respectful nod. "I hear you teach Fili and Kili battle skills. I toast you." Fili introduced them. "This is Gloin, our finest captain from the Blue Mountains." Gloin laughed. "Used to be, perhaps. Now the boys are showing the way." His brother Oin, who used a small metal hearing device, piped up and announced that Gloin's wife had recently produced a robust son. Gloin beamed, opened a pendant, and revealed a tiny portrait. "This is my son," he said, with fatherly pride. "Short and wide, like his father." Kili grinned. "What's the little one called?" "Gimli," Gloin said, an old word meaning flame. Bernal chewed on the name, then smiled. "Gimli, Flame, a fine name. If you'll allow it, I'd be honored to be his battle instructor." Gloin's eyes shone. "Really? You'd do that?" Bernal nodded. Kili slapped Gloin on the shoulder and laughed about being Gimli's senior in training. Fili inwardly hoped the child could survive Bernal's rigorous methods. Egon and Balin, two older men near each other, raised their cups and fell into a conversation about armor and battle stories. Millicent enjoyed the scene but remained a touch more reserved than the others, watching as the platters dwindled and the bottles emptied. At last the dwarves stood and pushed back their chairs. "The feast is over," someone announced, and a cheer went up. Bilbo exhaled with relief and hurried forward to clear the table. "Are you all full?" he asked, trying to keep his host's manners. "If not, there's probably more in the cupboard." "We are full, Baggins," came the loud reply. "If Bombur's full, then we're all full." Thorin cleared his throat and the hall stilled. "Help our generous host clear up," he ordered. "Beefer, Bofur, take up the clarinets. Fili, Kili, your fiddles. Bombur, fetch your drum." Bombur grumbled that he had eaten too much to stand, but Bofur was already hauling his drum from the doorway. The uncalled dwarves rose and, in a practiced routine, began stacking plates and cups so neatly it might have been a circus act. They formed towers of crockery and balanced them as they carried the loads toward the kitchen, all to a rhythm of song. Bilbo followed anxiously behind, fretting over each step and fretting even more loudly, but the stacks were handled with practiced care, and everything was soon spotless. When the music wound down, Thorin, who had not joined in the clearing, stood and spoke more seriously. "Now, we should discuss Bilbo Baggins joining our expedition." Bilbo froze, a buttered roll half hidden in his hand. "Expedition?" he asked, genuinely bewildered. "What expedition?" Chapter 60. The Took bloodline in his heart, Bilbo instinctively stepped behind Tarns and asked, "An expedition? What expedition? Gandalf didn't answer straight away. He coughed and said, Bilbo, fetch a lamp. Give us more light. Bilbo pouted, but as always, our curious hobbit went to fetch a lamp. Tarns, however, stopped him with a smile and a raised staff. Bilbo, you needn't trouble yourself. To Bilbo's astonishment, Tarns lightly waved his staff and cast a simple glintstone spell, Starlight. A soft, pale blue glow filled the room, brightening it at once. Oh, Bilbo exclaimed, staring at the orb hovering above Tarnis's head. Though Mr. Rogier told me you could use sorcery, I'm amazed to see it in person. Tarnis shrugged. It's nothing, just a trifle. He then looked at Gandalf and teased, Our Gandalf can do this sort of illumination too. He's only pretending not to remember certain questions. Gandalf cleared his throat, pulled a map from his gray robes, and spread it on the table before Thorin. Thorin wasn't entirely surprised. He had caught a glimpse of this map back at Stormvale Castle, but his eyes brightened as he studied it carefully. Bilbo edged out from behind Tarns and peered over Gandalf's shoulder. His voice was small as he read. Lone? Mountain? Gandalf nodded. Yes, far to the east, beyond ranges and rivers, through forests and wastelands, there stands a single peak. That is our destination, Mr. Baggins. Bilbo said nothing for a moment, just stared at the map. When Gandalf had the map unfolded, Gloin turned to Ori, the most learned among them, and said, Ori has read the omen. The signs say, the time has come. Oin chimed in. I heard from the tall folks in the east that ravens have already returned to the mountain. That's exactly the sign Ori spoke of. If the old birds return to the lonely mountain, the reign of the fierce beast will end, Ori said. So the prophecy goes. Prophecy. Tarns glanced at Gandalf, sensing the two were linked by it. Gandalf returned the look with a knowing smile. Bilbo's expression shifted. He tore his gaze from the map and suddenly, polite and curious, raised his hand. A fierce beast? What fierce beast? Beaufort put down his flute. Of course, Smaug, the terrible Smaug, the greatest danger of our age. Smaug, what is it? Or rather, what sort of creature? Bilbo asked again. Beaufort explained patiently. A dragon. It flies, breathes fire. Its teeth are like razors, its claws like hooks. It adores precious things above all. Bilbo scratched his head. Yes, I know what a dragon is like, but it still doesn't sound that frightening. The dwarves stared at him in disbelief. Bilbo, sincere, added, Really, I don't find Smaug that scary. Thorin laughed. It seems the Baggins has some courage in him. Beaufort pressed on. Even if it turns you to ash in an instant, like a furnace with wings, one flash of flame, searing heat, and you're gone. Bilbo's face froze, and he backed a step. Oh, that is indeed unpleasant, but compared to the dragons I've heard of, it's still ordinary. Gandalf shot Beaufort a look, and the talkative dwarf fell silent. Balin, who had been trading stories with Egon, leaned forward. What dragon have you heard of that's worse than Smaug? Gandalf, naturally, thought of Encalagon the Black, but Bilbo's answer surprised him. Bilbo pointed to Tarns. The dragon Mr. Tarns told me about. Ancient Dragon Fortisax. I won't forget the name. I just wrote that part of Mr. Tarns's adventures. A hush fell. Thorin and the dwarves exchanged puzzled looks. None of them had heard that name. They glanced at Tarnis as if expecting him to say more. Gandalf suspected the dragon's origins lay in Tarns's homeland. Balin asked kindly, Could you tell us what it was like, Mr. Baggins? Bilbo nodded. Mr. Tarns said Fortisax was an ancient dragon with hard, stone-like scales, but they turned black from absorbing a power of death. Its lightning was crimson, but it also spread a black-gold death-blight mist that could slay instantly. Black gold. Gandalf and Thorin exchanged a glance that held the same thought. The black-gold half of Tarns's golden tree, the one associated with death. Gandalf's mind raced. Thorin, less philosophical, merely felt reassured. If Tarnis had survived that dragon, then he must be formidable. Beaufort, awed, looked at Tarnis and asked, What happened to Fortisax in the end? Tarnis answered simply, It died. Fili and Kili nodded gravely. The outcome matched the image of their teacher's strength. Thorin cleared his throat and brought the company back to the matter at hand. Now that we have the map, I trust our wizard has more to tell. Balin agreed. The main gate is sealed, and you can't enter the Lonely Mountain by ordinary means. Mr. Gandalf surely knows how. Gandalf smiled. You are correct, Balin. I do have a way inside. He cleared his throat and spoke plainly. You all know Thorin's claim to kingship is not recognized by the seven dwarf kingdoms. They bow only to a rightful king. Only by retrieving the Arkenstone can Thorin's claim be justified. The Arkenstone lies buried beneath mountains of gold under the dragon. We need a burglar, someone small, unnoticed, to slip inside the mountain and seize it. He looked at Bilbo. And I know of a secret side door into the lonely mountain. Smaug is well accustomed to the scent of dwarves. He has surely never smelled a hobbit. Bilbo pointed at himself incredulously. A burglar? Me? Oin, having just fitted his hearing aid, called out, "Do you think you're nimble enough to be a burglar?" Bilbo laughed nervously. A burglar? Not me. Oin took out his hearing aid and laughed. He says he is. The dwarves erupted in noise again. Bilbo stood flustered, wanting to protest but unsure how. Thorin slammed his fist on the table. Enough! Quiet! The uproar fell away, and Thorin looked Bilbo over with his own eyes. Tell me, Mr. Baggins, have you ever fought? Bilbo didn't catch him. What? Thorin went on. Sword or axe? What weapon can you wield? Bilbo mimicked him in a half-joke. If pressed, I'm best at slicing bacon. Clearly not the skill of a burglar. He sighed. I'm not a burglar. If you need someone to host a feast, call me. But stealing? I've never stolen a thing. Thorin nodded as if he had expected that. Balin agreed. He's not burglar material. Dwalin added, the wilds are no place for a gentleman. He cannot fight nor fend for himself. Bilbo nodded vigorously. Gandalf watched Bilbo with a look of disappointment. The dwarves renewed their arguments over whether Bilbo could do the job. Just as Gandalf prepared to quiet them, Tarns's voice cut through softly. Excuse me, may I ask Bilbo a few questions? Thorin slammed the table again. The room silenced. Bilbo looked at Tarns and met his calm, smiling gaze. For some reason, the hobbit felt as if Tarns could see straight into him. A part of Bilbo hoped, suddenly, that Tarns would give him a nudge. What do you want to ask me? He said, not hiding the hope in his voice. Gandalf noticed it too. He had been wondering how to persuade Bilbo, and now it seemed Tarns might do the work for him. Tarns asked, Bilbo, what did you think of those adventure stories I told you? Bilbo answered without hesitation. They were wonderful. I never imagined one person's adventures could be so rich and varied. Tarns nodded, then addressed the bewildered dwarves. Bilbo, you can refuse these dwarves. Tell them to clean up your home and leave. I won't let them pressure you. The dwarves, led by Balin and Dwalin, looked at Tarns in surprise. Gandalf leaned back as if to rest, letting the answer be Bilbo's to give. Bilbo himself was surprised. Tarns continued, I'm serious. As your friend, I don't like seeing you forced into anything. If you are not ready for such an adventure, say so, and I'll put things right. He glanced toward the kitchen with a smile. I'll even replace the food they ate tonight. Bilbo murmured, That's not the point. Thorin snorted and closed his eyes, mimicking Gandalf. Tarns pressed on, gentle but direct. So, what is your answer, Bilbo? Bilbo wanted to refuse. He told himself he should refuse instantly, but the words stuck. He walked the short length of the room, restless. The Took in him, an old stirring, had already been awakened by Tarnis's tales, and the presence of the dwarves only fanned it. He longed to see high mountains, to hear pines and waterfalls, to explore caves, to carry a sword instead of a walking stick. The dwarves caught the change on his face and stifled snickers. Bilbo noticed the softer mood and with a heavy breath admitted, All right, I confess, I'm a timid fellow, no burglar, and I'm afraid of losing my life. Your adventures, Tarnis, sound as if you almost die every time. And yet, he lowered his head and smiled helplessly. It may sound foolish. Laugh if you like. I am a hobbit who fears death, and yet I long for adventure. No one mocked him. Bilbo looked up in surprise. Tarn said to Gandalf, a faint ruefulness in his voice, Did you always know what Bilbo wanted? Is that why you chose him? Gandalf tapped ashes from his pipe and smiled. That's part of it. The Took blood in him won't let him remain at Bag End all his days. More importantly, hobbits tread lightly. If anyone is to slip unnoticed into a mountain, a hobbit could be just the one. I believe Bilbo's abilities far exceed your estimations. He looked straight at Thorin. Trust me on this. Thorin regarded Bilbo again, seriously, then turned to Gandalf. Very well, we will follow your counsel, he addressed Balin. Draw up the contract for Bilbo, and also the contracts for Mr. Tarns and his 3 companions.